Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Good Naruto Makes a Deal with Kyuubi. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Since they were safe at home and surrounded by their fellow comrades, Naruto had always known that bars were the best place to get information, a group of inebriated shinobi lowering their defenses. If those at the top of the rankings got sufficiently inebriated, they would even divulge some highly classified information, which occurred more frequently than it ought to have. After all, they witnessed their village being easily destroyed in front of them, their friends and family being massacred, and the Kyuubi attack. In addition, the majority of them had to undertake particularly unpleasant tasks to restore the village to its former glory, following the catastrophe. They would therefore have plenty to drink away, which made sense. Speaking of the Kyuubi, he was recently appointed as their new Jinchuriki. Given how the villagers treated him, he reasoned that it must have been something along those lines. Naruto was aware of what Biju and Jinchuriki were because he had read about them in a library book. However, why did none of the Kyuubi's chakra feel like it? He didn't even feel especially bad about Konoha. Well, more than he ought to, given his circumstances, which he was certain would worsen tenfold if the Kyuubi had any influence over him. Naruto reasoned that the seal the Yondaime applied to him must have been powerful enough to keep the Kyuubi out of his way, which would make sense given that his father was undoubtedly the Yondaime. If Naruto didn't think so, he must be a dimwit. He resembled the Yondaime almost exactly, and no one else in the whole village had their appearance. Naruto was baffled as to why no one was aware that he was the Yondaime's child. Since his mother was the previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, he knew that she was Kushina, the only Uzumaki in the village at the time of Naruto's birth, so everyone had to know that he was an Uzumaki. His parents must have been married, right? And if his parents were married, why would no one be aware that he was a Hokage's child? Even if they weren't married yet, the villagers and other shinobi would have heard about the Yondaime because of their fame, wouldn't they? It simply didn't make sense. Were the villagers so naive that they failed to recognize the resemblance or accept that he was the Yondaime and his wife's child? Perhaps they were unable to accept that their Hokage had wed a Jinchuriki. Maybe they believed she was carrying someone else's child. Or did they believe that, at a time when everyone was aware that the Uzumaki clan had been exterminated, he was just a random Uzumaki child born close to the village? His head ached every time he considered it. He simply gave up trying to solve it. Why bother? His parents were dead. At least he knew who he was. The decision to make him the next one was clear because he had read the scant information about his mother and the Uzumaki clan in the library's books and knew that all of the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki had belonged to Uzumaki. He wasn't upset or resentful because he was the only other Uzumaki in the village. In a way, knowing that he was a part of his clan's legacy brought him closer to them. He grew up quickly because he had been left alone since he could walk and speak. In addition to being a Jinchuriki, taking care of himself made him smarter and more perceptive of the world. Konoha was the only place he knew, so he should hate it, he supposed, but at least he had the Hokage to protect him. However, he could see why he was treated that way by the villagers. Because they were afraid of him, the villagers detested him. And what people fear, they despise. However, reasoning like that was reserved for the weak. Naruto avoided the villagers as much as possible because he was determined not to be influenced by their weakness. Naruto stayed in the shadows and walked out of the bar. He nearly shook his head in embarrassment, but no one seemed to notice. He managed to sneak into a bar full of chunin and jonin at the age of 7, for Kami's sake. It was pitiful. They returned to being so overconfident that they were not observing their surroundings at home just 7 years after the Kyuubi attack. He had been brutally training to outshine high-ranking shinobi, of course, but still. They should constantly be alert for any kind of invasion or attack. Using the shadows and avoiding the hotspots for ambush sentries, Naruto moved stealthily through Konoha's streets in the direction of the Forest of Death. When he discovered that no one entered, it became his second home, except for that weird dark-haired girl he thought he heard someone call Anko, who was always too preoccupied to acknowledge him. Nevertheless, Naruto took care to avoid the place she often visited. Additionally, he stayed close to the edge, where there were fewer hostile forest dwellers. In his temporary residence, Naruto took a seat beneath a massive tree whose roots protruded so far from the ground that they formed a tiny cavern beneath it. After pushing some chakra through his body, Naruto finally understood the purpose of the seal on his stomach and turned to look at it. The seal wasn't one he had seen in any of the books he had read, but he could tell it was the result of extremely advanced fuinjutsu. To begin reading and learning on his own, Naruto was simply happy that the Hokage had personally taught him how to read, write, and access his chakra when he was 5 years old. He began reading books from the genin, chunin, and jonin sections of the library after having already read everything in the civilian and academy student sections. Most of the time, the villagers would just stare at him or ignore him, but if he displayed even the smallest hint of intelligence, they would become hostile. He had mastered the art of keeping his intelligence and curiosity hidden from everyone. As a result, he had no choice but to learn from books, which he had to borrow and return covertly because no one was available to assist him. He became immediately engrossed in the breakdown of seals after reading his first book on the subject. Fuinjutsu seemed to run in his family. Which it was, he assumed. He had mastered the fundamentals almost immediately after beginning with simple, introductory seals like scroll sealing. He didn't begin experimenting until he felt he had a firm understanding of seals. The seal exploded in the majority of his experiments. However, some turned out better than he had anticipated. One was the seal he had made, which enabled him to travel in the shadows and conceal himself entirely. It started when Naruto made a seal that he believed would enable him to manipulate the shadow of another person, just like the Nara clan had done. Naruto knew the Kekkei Genkei and specializations of the clans of Konoha because he had a basic understanding of them. The extent to which the villagers and even other shinobi depended on these clans, thinking they were unstoppable, irritated him. In order to demonstrate to the village that depending on a clan due to their Kekkei Genkei would be ridiculous, Naruto desired to be able to perform their techniques in his own unique manner. Although the Uchiha and Hyuga clans possessed uncopyable dojutsus, this did not prevent the clans from being overconfident, and everything had flaws. Although Naruto was not yet aware of those weaknesses, he was determined to discover them. Since the clans were believed to be all powerful, he wanted to dismantle Konoha's entire system for depending too much on them. When it occurred, Naruto was on his 6th test seal. He had never combined some of his blood with the ink he used to create the seal before. Placing the seal on the darkest area of a tree's shadow, he said, "Fuin Kagemain no Jutsu." While combining the rat seal that Naruto knew the Naras used for this jutsu with a hand seal he had created especially for his Fuinjutsu. Naruto sensed his chakra blending with the shadow as soon as his body was drawn into it. He lost focus because it felt so weird, and when the seal exploded, he was flung out of the shadow. For weeks, Naruto worked on the same seal, making only minor adjustments until he was satisfied with how it was polished. When he was learning something new, he was extremely critical of his own work and would not stop until he felt it was perfect. Naruto finally discovered that he could fully blend into the shadows if he applied the seal to himself rather than the shadow and focused hard enough. Although it wasn't exactly what he had in mind at first, he thought this was a really cool and practical method. In addition, it was a positive step in the direction he was attempting to take. The concentration required to use the technique was reduced after Naruto managed to remain in the shadows for 3 days in a row. While he was getting used to the jutsu, he was simply relieved that he had so much chakra that he could use it constantly. Additionally, he experimented by permanently painting the shadow travel seal on his right upper arm. It was definitely worth the few minutes it had burned like it was on fire. He also painted the one for sealing on his left forearm after that was successful. He began using the jutsu, which Naruto named Ryoko no Kage, as his primary mode of transportation as soon as he felt he had total control over it. He only wandered the village long enough without it to ensure that people were aware of his presence. Additionally, he was working on improving the Ryoko no Kage so that he could connect shadows, change the size of the shadow he was in, and teleport between far-off shadows, the ability he was struggling with the most. In addition, Naruto started practicing basic taijutsu and developing his body's physical strength, speed, and endurance without the use of chakra. Despite knowing how to make them, he didn't use any weight seals because he was aware that using them at such a young age would harm his body or stunt his growth. It was simple to gain strength, speed, and endurance, but it was challenging to learn taijutsu from a book. At that point, Naruto began spying on other Konoha nin by using his Ryoko no Kage. He was able to observe the various taijutsu styles employed by the clans and other shinobi as a result. Naruto attempted all of them, combining aspects of each of the styles he observed to create his own. Additionally, he began practicing his bukajutsu, utilizing a variety of weapons but concentrating mostly on the dual blades he had taken from the trash of a weapon store. 2 complete swords that had broken were once represented by the blades. After bringing them home, Naruto sharpened them and leveled them to the same length. They were his most prized belongings. Naruto gradually started combining the two after a few hours of bukajutsu training and then immediately switching to taijutsu. This actually worked better with the dual blades for the kind of taijutsu he was trying to perfect. He set out to practice bukajutsu first, then kenjutsu, and finally taijutsu, so that his body would become accustomed to performing each one independently and be able to switch between them with ease. He didn't begin practicing ninjutsu until he was satisfied that he was sufficiently skilled in fuinjutsu, bukajutsu, kenjutsu, and taijutsu. He believed that many shinobi made the mistake of relying too much on their ninjutsu. Any ninjutsu could be blocked by the Uchiha clan using their Sharingan to copy it. Any frequent user of Fuin could apply a chakra, suppressing seal to someone, and some sensor type shinobi could detect the type of ninjutsu a person was going to use. Naruto was determined not to be vulnerable or taken by surprise. He considered every scenario in which he might be unable to perform one or more forms of jutsu and ensured that he had contingency plans and safety measures in place. In the beginning, Naruto took his time learning and performing ninjutsu. He started by reading the books that introduced chakra. He gained knowledge about his chakra coils and points, as well as how it functions and what it does to and within the body. Naruto firmly believed that power came from knowledge. Instead of jumping right into a jutsu without really understanding what he was doing, he could build from his knowledge of the fundamentals to make the jutsu easier to perform and stronger over time. People would blow themselves up or waste countless hours in chakra trying to figure something out when there was a much simpler solution if one started from the beginning. In light of this, Naruto initially concentrated on controlling his chakras. He began by learning the fundamentals, such as using chakra to hold a leaf to his body, and then he learned how to walk on water and up trees. After reading some anatomy books, he even taught himself medical ninjutsu to ensure he had perfect control. It required nearly 2 months of continuous training to achieve complete chakra control, which was much longer than he had anticipated, but he reasoned that it must have been because of his vast chakra reserves. He made the decision to attempt learning some low-level jutsu using all of the main nature manipulations after he felt he had complete control over his chakras. That, he believed, would be the most effective way to discover his affinity and attempt to develop affinities with other natures. Naruto was determined to have them all because he wanted to overtake the Hokage in power one day, even though he had read that full nature manipulation was so uncommon that only Sandaime were known to be capable of it. When Naruto used D-rank ninjutsu of different nature manipulations, he didn't really notice any difference. It became clear when he attempted to use a C-ranked one from a book he had stolen from a genin. He seemed to use the most chakra for earth techniques and the least for wind techniques. Naruto decided to start by working on the natures he did not have an affinity with because he assumed wind must be his affinity. Following Naruto's tradition, he began by reading about the potential reactions and how to shape his chakra into each element. In order to comprehend the fundamental components of nature, he also made sure to read books on biology and physics. To his dismay, those books appeared to have been hardly touched. Shinobi should know what they were dealing with if they were going to manipulate and transform nature. Naruto had a good repertoire of B and C ranked jutsu with a variety of nature manipulations by the time he was 9 years old. He made the decision to stop learning until he had mastered his favorites and could perform them with little to no hand seals. He believed that before advancing to a higher ranking ninjutsu, he needed to acclimate his body and chakra to the natures. At that point, the Hokage wrote Naruto a letter expressing his desire for him to enroll in the academy. In his letter, the Hokage expressed his regret that Naruto was always alone and suggested that he should spend more time with kids his own age. But the true reason the Hokage enrolled Naruto in the academy was because he was concerned about Naruto's ability to simply vanish and reappear whenever he felt like it. Not even his crystal ball could locate him. He hoped Naruto wasn't planning anything or getting involved in anything risky because he knew the villagers weren't very friendly toward the boy. He believed that by forming some friendships with people his own age, the boy would be deterred from detesting the village and becoming a possible danger. In case he was actually planning something, he made sure to inform Naruto the day before classes began. Although the Sandaime had affection for the boy and felt a sense of duty to him, the village's security came first because he was the Hokage. Since he already knew everything the academy could teach him and his abilities far outstripped anything academy level, Naruto had no desire to go. Though it was only a suggestion, as the letter stated, he knew he could not refuse because there was unquestionably an underlying order for him to attend. Naruto made the decision to try something different because he didn't want to waste time or interfere with his intense training regimen by attending classes. After reaching the river that ran through the Forest of Death using Ryoko no Kage, he started working on one of the hardest seals he had ever created. He needed to do it correctly the first time because it would require the majority of his chakra, and he didn't have time to try again after recharging his chakra. Naruto had to write up the seal 12 times before he was satisfied that it was the best he could do. From one of the nearby trees, he cut a big log and set his seal on top. Since Naruto had begun incorporating his blood into the ink for all of his seals to strengthen them and give him greater control when using them, he then cut his hand, spilling some extra blood on the log. Fuin. Kyukyoku Bunshin no Jutsu. Was then uttered as he covered the log with a lot of mud, applied a half-dot ram seal with the other hand, and pushed nearly all of his chakra into the seal. Although Naruto had observed that each of the various nature manipulations had a clone, he had assumed that since wood was so resilient, a wood clone would be able to withstand more blows before dispelling. After giving it some thought, he concluded that mud would be the best material because they were both earth-based and that combining two natures would make the clone even more durable. Furthermore, anything less than a fatal blow should dispel the seal due to the combination of the two nature manipulations. In order to prevent the clone's chakra from running out, the seal was also intended to reduce its usage. He didn't want to take the chance, but he would have spent more time honing and practicing the clone while attending class and then switching with it. Since Naruto was aware that his entire personality could not be fully replicated in the clone, he decided that sending in a clone that appeared to be someone else for a few days would undoubtedly draw notice. Additionally, the clone could fool any Hyuga in the class if they didn't pay close attention to him, but he was certain that if he and the clone switched places, they would notice a difference in his chakra coils and points. If anyone from the Inuzuka clan was present, it would be the same. In Konoha, it was not unusual for someone to smell like wood and for a child to smell like mud. Most likely, they would assume that he had been playing outside a lot. However, the smell of wood and mud would not be as noticeable in the original. Their insects would also be able to detect the difference if someone from the Aburame clan were present. Therefore, his only option was to send the clone in his place right away. Using the last of his energy, he carefully examined the clone to make sure everything appeared to be in order. You are to go to the academy in my place and act as though you are the real Naruto. Stay in the village and only come to me when you have important information, if there is an emergency, or if you graduate, which is your goal. I have given you enough chakra that it should hold you for a few years if you use it sparingly. I want you to make sure people believe that you are not very smart or strong, and try to stay out of the way of the villagers. Understood? Naruto replied to the clone. With a bouncy gait and an expression that suggested he hadn't been listening, the Naruto clone exclaimed, "Yosh, Datbeo," before sprinting in the direction of the village. Perfect. A dud, Naruto thought grimly before passing out. Naruto was aware that he could not go back to the village with his clone present for fear of giving himself away and attracting a lot of questions. If they believed he posed a threat, perhaps even more. In addition to the fact that he would borrow books from other shinobi without their knowledge, he had been spying on his fellow Konoha-nin, which would have been a bad impression on him if they discovered it. He returned to his tree in the Forest of Death, his now permanent home. After waking up, he knew that he could live comfortably there and not have to go into town to buy anything because he had already become accustomed to hunting and gathering food there. Finally, Naruto could test out the Kyuubi's seal without having to go into town. Fearful of what might occur, he had not yet touched it. He believed that he was sufficiently knowledgeable about seals to prevent unintentionally releasing the Biju, but he was unsure of the type of transformation he or his chakra would experience upon encountering the Kyuubis. He believed that the only way to learn more about his seal was to test it out directly because he had looked everywhere and had not been able to find anything similar in any of the books he had read or the information he had received from others. He could see that the seal was made up of layers. Naruto reasoned that releasing the first layer would be sufficient to grant him access to the Kyuubi without significantly affecting him. The Gogyo Fuin, and its corresponding Gogyo Kaian, were mentioned in passing in the books he had read and heard about, and the person he had heard it from wasn't an authority on the subject. He believed he could test the Gogyo Kaian and see if it had any effect based on what he could decipher. To ensure that he didn't unlock too much of the seal if it did work, he would only use a small amount of chakra. After concentrating a tiny bit of chakra onto his fingertips and inhaling deeply, Naruto rapidly pressed his fingers onto the seal, spreading them out until they touched some of the outer layers. He blacked out because the pain in his body was so great when he did it. When Naruto woke up, he was lying on his back in what appeared to be a sewer with pipes running along the walls and ceiling. The water churned violently around him, about 5 inches deep, and the pipes and walls seemed to be pulsing wildly. He scanned his surroundings quickly without moving, but he saw nothing else. Although he was unable to feel the water soaking him, he was aware of the immense amount of malevolent chakra emanating from the end of the hallway all around him. Slowly, Naruto stood up and began walking in the direction of the power source. Naruto was taken aback by the automatic defense of his mind. The Kyuubi was all that was present. He questioned whether that was a characteristic of the Uzumaki clan or if it was a common trait among all Jinchuriki, ensuring that no one could control him and, consequently, the Biju within. It might have been a component of the seal that restrained the Kyuubi. In any case, he also needed to defend the Kyuubi in some way. Even though Naruto himself wouldn't be impacted, it wouldn't be ideal if someone could simply waltz into his head and quickly reach the Kyuubi. There was a cage with gates that extended from the ceiling to the floor in a cavernous room at the end of the tunnel. Naruto noticed the seal used to keep the Kyuubi inside the gates about halfway up. As he walked slowly toward the gates, Naruto examined the seal and waited for the Kyuubi to approach. Naruto waited a long moment before he heard the Kyuubi moving and felt the air in the room change. Waves of power rolled off the Biju, and Naruto felt them. Power had never felt so strong to him. The amount of malevolent chakra emanating from the cage nearly choked Naruto. In the traditional stance that shinobi gave to their commanding officer, Naruto knelt with one knee on the ground, placed the fist of the same side next to it, and placed his other hand on the knee bent pointing upwards, head down, before the Kyuubi could finally lay eyes on his container. This was the only thing he felt justified doing when meeting with such a powerful being. The Kyuubi waited a minute before he could speak. To be honest, he was taken aback. No human had ever knelt before him, not even his Jinchuriki. Usually, they would simply invade his personal space and demand authority, or they would simply leave him alone. Although he did not display it, the Kyuubi began to get excited. This one might be useful. This damn seal still prevents me from controlling him, but I might be able to force him to take it off long enough for me to take control. Eyeing Naruto, the Kyuubi remarked, "I see that you recognize true power, human." The Kyuubi understood the purpose of the seal and asked, "What has brought you to me before the pre-arranged time within this seal?" The boy's chakra had already begun to be added to his pathways in very small amounts, just enough for his body to adjust. Years were still expected to pass before the seal's first layer was released. Still on his knees, thinking rapidly, Naruto uttered, "I wish to make a partnership, of sorts." When he tested the seal, he had no idea that he was going to meet the beast, but he was aware that if he played his cards correctly, this encounter could work out well for him. Although he was aware that the Kyuubi would not approve of his request, he was determined to try his best to make amends with the Biju. With an angry growl, the Kyuubi declared, "I do not partner with humans." The human showed no signs of fear, so the Kyuubi had to determine whether to try to frighten it into obedience or if it would give it voluntarily. The human child's thoughts were hidden from the Kyuubi. It fascinated him and it irritated him. He had never encountered a person he couldn't read, and the one in front of him was a mystery. To which Naruto replied, "I said, of sorts, I know from studying the seal that the layers are meant to be released at certain points and this will allow your chakra to start flowing through me." To which the Kyuubi interrupted, "It already has." "Yes, and I apologize for that, but I did not know any other way to speak with you without removing that first layer." Naruto replied. The Kyuubi squinted at his container but remained silent, preferring the human to get right to the point. "I did not wish to simply take your chakra from you, again, my apologies that it is already happening. I first wanted to ask you for your chakra. I feel that everyone should become strong using their own power, not someone else's, but seeing as how we really have no choice in the matter, I see no other option unfortunately." In addition to asking, the Kyuubi said, "You are asking to use my chakra." Indeed, he had never encountered a more perplexing human being than this one. Naruto said, "Yes." Looking up, the Kyuubi saw the spot where he knew the seal was. He couldn't just say no and his chakra would remain with him. Whether the Kyuubi wanted it or not, the human was going to get his chakra. The Kyuubi turned back into the cage's darkness and said, "Very well." The Kyuubi turned back to him, curious, after Naruto said, also, sounding hesitant for the first time, "I was wondering if you would be willing to share some of your knowledge with me? I have no family or sensei to teach me anything, and although I feel I have been able to come far, considering my situation, I believe that knowledge is the truest and most dangerous kind of power and I can only get so far with the books in the library." The majority of people were mistaken to believe that knowledge meant little. This human child appeared to understand the potential power of knowledge. "Why do you want to know?" the Kyuubi inquired. Naruto merely stated, "I wish to bring about change." The Kyuubi narrowed his eyes in frustration and said, "Continue. The way the village is now is deficient. The villagers are stupid and lazy, believing they are safe, when at any moment they could be wiped out. The shinobi here have gotten arrogant, believing they can handle anything that could happen, when it has already been proven, by you that they cannot. They rely heavily on the clans that reside within these walls, whom they seem to believe are omnipotent. Even the clans think that way about themselves. I want to show the village their miscalculation. I want them to know that they are not nearly as powerful as they believe. I want to show them true power, so they will absolutely understand it," Naruto said with some bitterness. Voice. It's true that the Kyuubi was pleased with his new container. He questioned whether the human could hear the onset of madness in his own voice. The Kyuubi himself experienced every emotion that the human child listed. For a moment he wondered if he had been using the seal to influence the child already, but he ignored the idea. Unfortunately, the seal was completely impervious to that. He was certain that this container would work for him. The Kyuubi would have laughed at the child's good fortune if he hadn't been still kneeling in front of him. "I allow you to use my chakra as you see fit. It is your responsibility to access it and control it. It will not be my fault, nor will I help, if you go too far with it. As for the knowledge, I will offer it when, and if, I feel like doing so," the Kyuubi said, returning to the darkness of the cage. When Naruto could no longer hear the Kyuubi moving, he finally got to his feet and said, "Thank you." Unsure of how to get back into his body, Naruto chose to perform a chakra pulse in the hopes that it would wake him up, which it did. He regretted it as soon as he was back in his body. Hundreds of glass fragments seemed to be tearing apart his body from the inside out. He was unable to move due to the extreme pain, and tears began to well up in his eyes. He really did feel as though he was dying. Naruto now understood the purpose of the seal's configuration. He had previously unsealed the first layer, which was supposed to loosen once his chakra coils had completed developing. He was aware that his only option was to do his best not to engage in combat with the Kyuubi's invading chakra. It would take his coils a lot longer to adjust if he did. All he could hope for was that he would survive it. Naruto had to endure terrible pain for 30 minutes before he could move once more. It was another day and a half before the pain went away entirely. He only tried to access his chakra at that point. For a few minutes, his body felt like it was on fire, but the more Naruto used the chakra, the more accustomed his body became to it. After the burning sensation subsided, Naruto made the decision to use the straightforward leaf test to determine how much the Kyuubi's chakra hampered his control. The leaf exploded in a fiery explosion the second Naruto attempted to press the tiny amount of chakra needed to make the leaf adhere to the palm of his hand. Naruto's hand was left with third-degree burns, which healed almost instantly. Naruto thought angrily, "Well, shit, I have to start all over again." A sudden outburst of anger caused him to vent his frustration on a enhanced dummy he had made, until he regained his composure and clarity. "Additionally, my feelings are impacted." "Fantastic. You should start at the beginning." Once more, Naruto started gathering leaves and, as a last-minute addition, put on fingerless gloves of shinobi quality. Safer rather than burned. 3 years had passed before Naruto regained complete control over his chakra. Additionally, he had loosened the seal 3 times and believed that doing so would make him lose self-control. As it was, the Kyuubi had briefly taken control the 3rd time he loosened it. Although defeating the Kyuubi required all of Naruto's strength, he was now able to control up to 5 tails. He had to constantly control his emotions, which had become more erratic, and suppress the evil chakra and murderous intent that would roll off him. Every time he loosened the seal, Naruto had to relearn how to control his chakra, but he believed that if he did it again, it would only take a little while to get it back. At last, he understood why his chakra control was affected when a layer of the seal was released. Prior to the Kyuubi's infusion, Naruto's chakra was only marginally unstable because his coils were still growing, but the Kyuubi's would fluctuate throughout his body. Sometimes it was just a little bit more than his own, and other times there was a big explosion of it. Finally, Naruto managed to get his coils to stop pulsing the Kyuubi's chakra. He had now fully developed larger coils that allowed a steady flow of his chakra, which had begun to fuse with the Kyuubi's. Naruto had also mastered his own style of taijutsu and kenjutsu during that period. Additionally, he had progressed to the point where he could seal with just one hand and use the few ninjutsu he preferred. The hardest part had been practicing his genjutsu. You could understand how genjutsu works, but you couldn't practice it without a qualified sensei to show you how. Strangely enough, the Kyuubi intervened at that point and began teaching him and giving him advice, along with some extremely graphic and violent ideas. As Naruto had discovered in this instance, the ability to communicate telepathically with the Kyuubi since releasing the seal the 2nd time was more of a benefit than a drawback. When Naruto first began practicing his genjutsu on a clone, the Kyuubi began yelling at him and calling him derogatory names. The Kyuubi began actively involving himself in all of Naruto's training after the failed genjutsu attempt. He even gave him some jutsu. Naruto was also able to master the manipulation of fire nature with the aid of Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto felt his clone rapidly approaching while he was learning Kaden. Hinoiki. a modified version of one of Kyuubi's own attacks that the Kyuubi were teaching him. In order to prevent his clone from running into the fire, he had to immediately cut off the jutsu. Naruto thought, Kami, I really did screw this one up. When he stops in front of the original, he is wearing a bright orange jumpsuit and goggles that look ridiculous. First, his clone nearly runs into its own death or, well, dispelment. Naruto was unaware that Konoha even carried such a product. He couldn't have purchased it in any case, of course. With the exception of his ink, which he made himself, everything that Naruto owned was recovered from trash cans and repaired. In the same moss green short, sleeved shirt, black shinobi pants, and black sandals that he was created wearing, Naruto pondered how his clone could have gotten to that. When he saw the expression of pure excitement in his clone's eyes, he forgot about his thoughts about how his clone looked. With his hands flying and his feet bouncing, the clone started to say, Mizuki. Sensei is so awesome. You won't believe what he told me. I never would have thought, since Iruka. Sensei is usually the only one that pays attention to me, but that's... Naruto interrupted him, rubbing his head. What are you here for? I told you to only come here if there was an emergency or when you graduate. The clone exclaimed, that's what I'm saying, Dabbeo. Loudly. This is my chance to graduate. I could never create a clone, which was what we needed to pass, so Mizuki. Sensei said that he knew a way that I could graduate besides that. He said if I take the scroll of sealing from Gigi's house and learn something from it, I could graduate. Naruto thought about dismantling his clone for this, Mizuki. Sensei was obviously attempting to persuade his clone to steal the scroll from the Hokage's house so that he could take it without being caught. Since the scroll could only be found in his home, he assumed that this, Gigi, was the Hokage. Then he gave it some more thought. In fact, this might be beneficial. He could learn some very strong jutsu if he managed to obtain that scroll. And if this Mizuki was as dumb as he sounded, setting him up would be easy. Naruto asked his clone, do you think that you could get this scroll from the Hokage? The clone then pumped his fist and said, of course, Dabbeo, I know his weakness. Although Naruto had serious doubts that his clone was aware of the Hokage's weakness, the clone was still a small part of him and ought to be skilled enough to obtain a scroll at the very least. Particularly if Mizuki had already defeated the guards, as he was certain to have done, to allow Naruto's clone to enter the Hokage's house unhindered. Alright. Quickly go and get it, then find a hidden spot to look it over. I will be there when you get back. Naruto stated to his clone. The clone was as easy as he believed. How the original was going to know where it was returning to wasn't even questioned. Naruto used Ryoko no Kage to enter his clone's shadow and follow him to the Hokage's house before the clone could flee. All of the guards were lounging outside, just as Naruto had assumed, but he doubted his clone saw them because it had climbed through a top-floor window. It had only been used recently because he could still smell the lingering smell of a poison in the air. He realized that, fortunately for the criminal, it was not a fatal one. He would be apprehended right away if he killed the Hokage's home guards. A seal attached to their suits is directly linked to their heartbeat. A red alert is sent out to all high-level shinobi as soon as their heart stops beating, and they all quickly encircle the house. At least his clone was smarter than the traitor Mizuki. Naruto wanted to know how his clone would defeat the Hokage. He actually held his breath in anticipation as soon as his clone opened the door leading from the room they entered into the hallway. It was impossible to overpower the Hokage. His clone's only option was to divert the Hokage's attention. The best course of action would be to use the knocked-out shinobi outside, but doing so would require quick reflexes. It would be impossible to obtain the scroll if the Hokage triggered the alarm before the clone could complete speaking. Naruto was there for that reason. Naruto could use the shadows to enter the room and retrieve the scroll himself if his clone was able to remove the Hokage from the house or even just a little bit farther away from it. He hoped there would be enough confusion to allow him to get away with it without any problems. When the Sandaime saw the clone in the hallway, he asked bewilderedly, Naruto, what are you doing here? Orochi no Jutsu. Naruto's face was nearly freezing. He had never witnessed anything so degrading. In fact, his clone changed into a nude woman. Furthermore, it caused a nosebleed that actually knocked the Hokage unconscious. That worked, and he was amazed. He also didn't think his clone would do something as terrible as changing into a woman. He hoped no one else had witnessed his clone use that technique, or that it was the first time it had been used. Then the Naruto clone headed for the room the traitor had described to him. After entering, Naruto stepped out of the shadow of his clone and into the room's shadows, scanning the area. Two smaller scrolls caught his eye right away. One bore his name and the other the Uzumaki clan symbol. He took those and swapped them out for blank scrolls from his seal. Later, when he had copied or committed to memory what was in them, he would figure out a way to return them. Just as his clone was leaving the room with the scroll of sealing on its back, he tucked the scrolls into the seal on his arm and leapt back into its shadow. Naruto emerged from the shadow of his clone and stood in front of it once they were in the safety of a forest on one of the training grounds. He took the scroll from the clone's back and thought, "Let's see what we have here." When his clone danced around the little clearing, he exclaimed, "Yosh! I did it, Datbeo! I bested Gigi, I am on my way to taking his place." Naruto didn't hear what his clone had to say because he was too preoccupied with studying the jutsu in the scroll. He glanced quickly over the contents of the scroll. It only discussed the risks and how to perform the technique for any of the jutsu that was covered. It only described its basic use without going into much detail about what they did. With a shrug, Naruto turned his attention to the first one, the Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. The fact that it was surprisingly simple to accomplish was likely due to the fact that he had been creating clones for years, and this one wasn't all that different. It simply required a different hand seal and more chakra. After effortlessly producing hundreds of clones, he eliminated all but 8 of them. He had the remaining clones copy down a jutsu from the scroll while he read the next one, the Chakra no Nawa, which came after the Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. It enabled the user to shape their chakra into an impenetrable rope. Naruto couldn't figure out why this was prohibited, but he surmised that it might be because it required perfect chakra control, which, if done incorrectly, could result in death from chakra depletion. He began studying how to shape his chakra into a rope while his clones were replicating their jutsu, and his original clone continued to dance and sing a ridiculous song that Naruto was ignoring. Naruto quickly detected a chakra signature approaching them. As his clones were completing their copies, Naruto vanished into the darkness. Naruto received the copies the clones had created after they were done, but his original clone closed the scroll, placed it on his back, and then dispelled it. Naruto realized immediately why they were prohibited, aside from the fact that they required a lot of chakra. His mind now contained all the data that his clones had replicated. The copies were no longer even necessary for him. Naruto thought to himself, "Oh, this is definitely useful." He was thrilled that everything had gone so well for him. Maybe his flawed clone wasn't as bad as he had first believed. Even as he watched the pursuer approach his clone, he began to get ideas for the Kage Bunshin's applications. "Naruto!" shouted the pursuer to his clone. Naruto stiffened, prepared for battle, even though they were not pursuing him. The dark-skinned man with the scar across his nose who had leapt into the clearing was asked by the Naruto clone, "Iruka. Sensei, I did it, I learned a technique from the scroll. So do I pass? Am I a genin now?" Naruto reflected. So this is not the traitor. So, the second one I sense approaching must be the one. Iruka questioned the clone. "What do you mean? Who told you that?" "Mizuki. Sensei, he said that if I learned a technique from the scroll, then I would pass." Mizuki jumped out of the brush and exclaimed, "Did I say that? I don't remember what I said. Either way, you served your purpose. Now hand over the scroll." In order to monitor the traitor for any indication of an attack, Naruto made sure to get a clear view of him and kept his attention on him rather than his clone and the other shinobi. Naruto concluded that the two shinobi must not be any higher than Jonin because it appeared that neither of them could sense him. However, since neither of them attacked right away but instead began to converse, they were probably chunin. During such times, only genin and chunin would stand around talking. Anbu and Jonin would attack first, then inquire. Boredom gripped Naruto as the traitor went on talking to Iruka and the Naruto clone, accusing Naruto of stealing the scroll and hurling taunts at the clone while outlining his plans to get away with it, calling Naruto a demon and revealing the truth about him. This is becoming absurd. Who is it that stands there and tells people about their plans? What is the reason behind the other chunin's inaction? Fight now, Naruto pondered. After that heinous jutsu his clone had used earlier, this must be the second most ridiculous thing he had ever seen. The traitor didn't attack until Mizuki told the Naruto clone that Iruka detested him, but Naruto had anticipated the attack and was ready. Iruka swiftly covered the Naruto clone with his body after Mizuki threw his Fuma shuriken, which was on his back, at it. Naruto sent out his chakra rope through the center of the weapon, making it as thin as possible to avoid detection, before the shuriken reached Iruka and his clone. This caused the weapon to slow down and prevented it from going too far into Iruka's back. Naruto could hear Iruka telling his clone that he didn't hate him, even though he was at a safe distance from the three. Touching, thought Naruto mockingly. Naruto saw his clone glance up at Iruka before rushing away. Naruto thought, "Oh good Kami," and immediately took off after his now crying clone. When he had the opportunity, he was definitely dispelling that thing. When he got close enough, he sprang his hand out of the shadow and grabbed his clone's ankle, causing it to fall face first to the ground. Naruto asked his clone in a whisper, "Where do you think you're going?" The clone sniffled and declared, "I'm leading Mizuki Sensei away from Iruka. Sensei, I don't want him getting hurt anymore." Naruto spoke slowly to his clone, "That's very nice and all, but you are aware that for the traitor's plan to work, he has to kill your Iruka Sensei, right?" The clone's eyes widened and he wiped away the tears as he peered around the forest, suggesting that he did. Naruto melted back into the darkness and said to his clone, "Don't worry, they're coming. Just be quiet and wait for the right time." As he vanished into the darkness, what appeared to be Naruto emerged from the brush and stopped directly behind the tree they were standing beside. Mizuki followed closely behind. As Naruto observed Naruto fending off Mizuki, he thought, "Clever." With a silent sigh, Naruto observed more insults and conversation before Iruka stopped the transformation. The fight didn't start until after that. Naruto was not impressed at all. Iruka and the traitor didn't appear to be very strong. Furthermore, neither practiced any taijutsu or ninjutsu. They merely threw weapons at one another. Iruka appeared to be losing badly and was about to die. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed his clone inserting his hands into the Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu seal. Startled, Naruto lifted his eyebrows, but he quickly touched the clone and gave it just enough chakra to perform the jutsu. Thus, while he and the other clones were working on the scroll, the clone was singing and dancing around. Every Naruto clone screamed, "Don't you dare touch Iruka Sensei," and leapt simultaneously onto Mizuki. Although Naruto wouldn't admit it, he was impressed by the way the traitor was beaten by the clones. Although he would have killed the man himself, it was preferable for his clone to kill him and save his life. In a sense, it was his clone's battle, and after the man was questioned, the traitor's survival would demonstrate his innocence. After tying up the unconscious traitor, Naruto saw Iruka, who was seriously injured, give the clone his headband and inform him that he had died. Relieved that the evening had gone so well, Naruto quietly slipped away. Naruto never felt more at ease in his apartment than he did in the forest. Naruto had gotten used to the surroundings ever since he moved there. In fact, he connected with it in some way. Because they began to treat him like one of their own, he had formed bonds with some of the forest's creatures, including the tigers and bears, with whom he occasionally went hunting. He thought it was partially him, but that could have been the influence of the Kyuubi. When they were injured, he even had the opportunity to practice his medical ninjutsu on them. Because it was teeming with creatures, he was also able to refine his senses. Although his senses were limited to his immediate surroundings, they were far better than they had been, and he was working to increase their range. With a resigned sigh, he returned to his home in the forest to begin packing up his possessions. It was time for him to dispel his clone and return to town now that he was a genin. He had until tomorrow to get ready to be around people once more. But as he got closer, he sensed that someone else had already arrived. He emerged from his shadow and moved slowly closer, recognizing the chakra signature and feeling as though whoever was there was waiting for him. He recalled seeing the woman, Anko, sitting atop the roots that formed his home's roof as his tree came into view. She looked at him and said, "Congrats." He was shocked to learn that she must have been aware of him and had been observing him the entire time. However, he had been completely unable to tell. He frowned deeply and asked tensely, "How did you know?" She pointed to her arm, which had been concealed from him, and held up a snake curled around it, saying, "The snakes." Naruto felt like hitting his head for being careless. Snake summons, he thought angrily. Of course. Some of the snakes appeared so odd because of this. I'm not going to repeat that error. I appreciate the warning. To the Kyuubi, Naruto said angrily. It didn't seem like much, and you don't pay much attention to me. You ought to have worked it out on your own. Angrily, the Kyuubi answered. As he got ready for battle, Naruto questioned, "So, did you want something?" Even though he didn't think she was trying to kill him, she was still looking for a fight. She pointed to the back of her neck and said, "Depends. Did you find out anything useful?" When Naruto saw what he recognized, his eyes narrowed. She wanted to know if the scroll of sealing contained any information about the cursed seal of heaven. "I might have seen something. I'll need some time to work it out, though," he stated. Anko got up after giving a nod. With a smile and a wink, she turned around and held up her hand in parting before vanishing into the woods, later. In an attempt to calm himself, Naruto stomped angrily beneath the roots and began packing everything into his arm seal. He disliked being taken by surprise. He made some shadow clones and began training after sealing everything but his bedding. When Naruto finished training the following morning, he said aloud, "That only worked when I didn't know what it was." The snake in the branches above him jerked, then vanished back to its original location with a poof, allowing Anko to take its place. "Looks like you've learned some pretty strong jutsu, but do you think you could use them well in a fight?" Anko chuckled. Naruto simply responded with a snort. She smirked viciously and cracked her knuckles, saying, "Let's test that out, shall we? It's been a while since I had a good fight and it looks like you could give me one." Naruto smirked and assumed a defensive stance, saying, "Yes, but you're a genin and I'm just a genin. That's a big difference in skill." She shrugged and said, "Details." Then she charged at him. This one was beginning to appeal to Naruto. He sensed that the Kyuubi concurred. His clone arrived later that day to discover the area destroyed. The ground was littered with tiny craters, trees had been uprooted and destroyed, and smoke from burned areas was still present. As the clone made his way through the devastation, he discovered his creator watching the sunset while lying spread eagle on his back on the ground, his clothing charred, sliced, and blood stained. Naruto's clone only acknowledged its existence by briefly turning his eyes in its direction before turning back to face the sun. Sitting beside him, his clone questioned, "Lose a fight?" Naruto answered, "She'd like to think so, but it was more of a draw." The Kyuubi snorted, and he heard it. The Kyuubi was still impressed, but he had definitely lost. Against someone as skilled as the woman, his Jinchuriki performed better than he had anticipated. He didn't even use any of the Kyuubi's chakra, and his Jinchuriki had largely held up well against her. His clone informed him, "Hitaki Kakashi is our sensei." Eagerly, Naruto sat up. He was extremely fortunate. Naruto could learn a lot from Kakashi, who was one of the village's strongest shinobi. With a grimace, his clone went on, "He apparently values teamwork above all else." Naruto raised an eyebrow in inquiry. "He made us do some ridiculous bell test to test our teamwork. Told us something breaking rules or trash. Something abandoning comrades or worse. I wasn't really listening." Naruto couldn't resist rolling his eyes. His clone had a severe hearing impairment. "But we passed, so it's cool." As Naruto got ready to learn everything he could from his clone, he asked, "Who else graduated?" "There's Haruno Sakura, she's the best. Hyuga Hinata, Nara Shikamaru, Inuzuka Kiba, Akamichi Choji, Aburame Shino, Yamanaka Ino, she's Sakura's best friend, and that bastard Uchiha Sasuke." Naruto's clone growled the last name. The more names his clone said, the deeper the frown on Naruto's face became, and the last name was the one that deepened the furrow the most. The name Uchiha made the Kyuubi bristle a little, but he didn't notice it. Since their families were close and they would want to continue the formation of their clans, Naruto was not surprised that a Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamichi would all be in the same class. However, it was unsettling for a child from each of the major clans to be in the same class, especially the final member of the Uchiha clan. Maybe a law was passed requiring them to have children simultaneously. However, that seemed over the top. He believed that no one could compel someone to become pregnant at a certain moment. However, they could be convinced to do so without realizing it. He pondered whether the Hokage was not as uninformed about the clans as he appeared to be. Children from each clan would have to cooperate and learn about one another's advantages and disadvantages if they were placed on teams. They would come to understand that their clans were not the highest authority. Intrigued, Naruto said to his clone, "It seems you don't like the Uchiha, but you have feelings for the Haruno girl." He had no idea that his clone would be capable of feeling intense emotions for humans. It appears that he used some good parts of the seal to make the clone. It's going to be an interesting team. Yup. One day Sakura-chan will realize that I'm better than that jerk Sasuke and she'll get over him and go out with me. And that bastard Sasuke is my rival. I'm definitely gonna beat that asshole into the dirt. The replica screamed with joy. "Wait, how did you know they were my teammates? They decided teams by grades. Do you know everyone's grades?" "That may be the case in normal circumstances, but this is highly unusual. They wouldn't separate the Ino, Shika, Cho team, so they will all be together. The Hyuga, Inuzuka, and Aburame will be together, since they are from the other prominent clans and the heads of their clans would want them with another member of the clan. That leaves me, the Haruno girl, who is a civilian, and the Uchiha, whom isn't really a member of a prominent clan anymore since he is the last of his, to be on a team together." The throwaways, Naruto thought to himself. After all, it made sense. His clone's face took on an expression of understanding. His clone looked down at its hands, which were clasped tightly together in its lap, and asked softly, "So, does it happen now?" Naruto nodded as he turned to face his clone. His clone said, its eyes distant, "Can you promise me something? I was going around telling everyone I was going to be the Hokage someday, you know." "Well, it was more than that. I was actually promising everyone that I would do it. Could you keep that promise for me?" Naruto sat silently for a long time. It wasn't such a bad idea when he considered it. Naruto had believed that he was strong enough to be an influential person or an Anbu captain. As the Hokage, however, he would have far more authority. The authority to finally implement some long, overdue, significant changes in the village. He would simply need to incorporate studying politics into his daily schedule. He nodded and assured them, "I can do that." He smiled reassuringly at his clone. It said, "Thanks," before Naruto snubbed it. "It ought to have served as a training dummy for us," Kyuubi said. "If I had torn its tongue out, it would have dispelled. Furthermore, you say that only to watch the shit get kicked out of someone who looks like me." Naruto made the accusation. He received no response. Naruto met with his team for the first time the following day. Additionally, it was the day of their first expedition. His teammates were waiting for him when he arrived at the designated meeting spot. Naruto was aware that Kakashi frequently arrived late because he was visiting the graves of his departed teammates. He had seen him there numerous times. "Naruto, you're late," a girl with pink hair shouted at him while trying to strike him in the head. Naruto used his arm to block her blow. Normally, he would strike back if someone attacked him in that way, but he thought this was her greeting, strange as it was. He moved away from her and the Uchiha to lean on a tree with his arms crossed and said, emotionlessly, "Apologies." His teammates' eyes were wide with surprise as they gazed at him. He wasn't wearing his typical orange jumpsuit, which they had just noticed. Just as the Uchiha opened his mouth to speak, Kakashi appeared. Instead of waiting around, Naruto had made sure to get there right before their sensei so he could train for a while. On his way, he had dispatched a Kage Bunshin to keep an eye on Kakashi and dispel him. Kakashi questioned in surprise, "Sorry I'm late. There were these bandits and, Naruto, what are you wearing?" In unison, 3 pairs of eyes turned to Naruto. His response was, "Clothes." In addition to his standard black shinobi pants, sandals, and moss green short-sleeved shirt, he was also sporting a black trench coat that contained all of his weapons, with the exception of his 2 blades, which were kept in the seal on his arm. The trench coat and slouch he was wearing were meant to conceal the fact that he was a couple of inches taller and more muscular than his clone had been. He had tied a longer black cloth around his forehead, replacing the one on his Hide.8. Kakashi waved a hand at him and said, "Yes, but what happened to the—" Naruto simply shrugged and asked, "Orange?" He would be damned if he behaved as stupidly as his clone, even though he was aware that it had behaved differently from him. The Kyuubi seemed to agree with him. Sakura approached Naruto slowly and said, "Naruto, are you okay?" with genuine concern in her voice. After giving her a brief glance, he dodged 5 shuriken that were hurled at him and grabbed the Uchiha's foot when he attempted to kick him. With a kunai in hand, the Uchiha backed away from Naruto and yelled, "It's an imposter." Naruto simply let out a sigh. He turned to face his sensei and asked, "Hitaki, Sensei, will you please tell Uchiha-san that I am not an imposter?" The way he spoke to Kakashi and Sasuke made them all jump. Sasuke kept trying to fight Naruto with newfound vigor, but Kakashi took his Hide.8 out of his Sharingan and activated it while glaring at Naruto. "If you can call that fighting," thought Naruto, rolling his eyes inwardly. "Pathetic," he heard the Kyuubi add. He covered his Sharingan and said, "It's the real Naruto." His voice was shocked. He, too, had believed it to be a fake. However, he was interested in learning how Naruto learned about the Sharingan and its capabilities. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. In addition to everything else Naruto was concealing, "I think you have some explaining to do." With a calm response, Naruto said, "I think we have a mission to do." They remembered, and their eyes widened a little. They had completely forgotten about their first mission because they were so preoccupied with Naruto's transformation. Kakashi looked at him gravely and said, "Right, well, then." After giving a simple nod, Naruto pushed off the tree to go to Hokage Tower for their mission briefing. Everyone stared hesitantly at his back as they followed him. The Haruno girl, however, was hesitantly staring at his back. He could sense the Uchiha and Kakashi's glare trying to char a hole in his back. Naruto simply let out an inward sigh. This is going to be awful, he thought. At the conclusion of their most recent mission, the Hokage remarked, "Good work, everyone. He gave Kakashi a quick glance, and the two engaged in one of their quiet exchanges that Naruto could easily understand. After each mission briefing, they appeared to be having those. "Have you noticed anything?" the Hokage's gaze inquired. He had also been taken aback by Naruto's abrupt transformation and had instructed Kakashi to closely monitor him. "Just the typical strange behavior." Kakashi's response stated, "He hasn't yet used any real skills." "Do you think we ought to test him?" The Hokage nodded to himself and hummed aloud, "That would be best." "Well, I know that it is unusual for a new genin team such as yourselves to do anything but D-rank missions, but you have shown exceptional knowledge and skills, so I think it should be alright to give you a C-rank mission." The Hokage replied with a grin. Naruto kept his face expressionless and did not roll his eyes. It was so obvious, he thought. "It's a protection mission. Tazuna-san, could you please come in here?" The Hokage responded. The man who entered had a sullen expression on his face and the physique of a diligent worker who had consumed a little too much food and drink. He had light gray hair on his head and in his beard. As he got closer to Team 7, he pushed the glasses even more onto his nose and took a swig from the bottle he was holding. He said, clearly annoyed, "What, this is it? Kids?" Sasuke gave the man a fierce look and said, "You'd better be good." Naruto sensed two shinobi observing them from the trees as soon as they left Konoha the following morning. He made the decision to hold off on attacking them until he had seen what they were up to. He didn't want to give away too much just yet because Kakashi was watching him closely. In order to slow down, he had even finally turned on his weight seals. He chose to walk in the back of the group in the hopes of avoiding conversation even though he knew they had to go east to reach Mizu no Kuni. Kakashi glanced at the puddle they had discovered on the road, indicating to Naruto that he had also noticed. Naruto had to choose between taking action and letting Kakashi handle it. By the time Naruto reached the puddle, he had concluded that a little tampering with it wouldn't cause any harm. He deliberately splattered his foot onto the puddle. He launched his chakra out through the bottom of the puddle in the shape of a spike as soon as his foot touched its surface. Naruto had been practicing after getting the notion from the Chakra no Nawa. That if his chakra could form a rope, it could also form in other ways. As soon as he heard the splash, Kakashi turned to see Naruto remove his now damp foot from the puddle. A deadpan Naruto remarked, "Didn't splash as much as I thought it would." The other members of the group had already turned to face him. Two shinobi emerged from the puddle, their chests smeared with blood, and he sensed the shift behind him and leapt to where the rest of his group was. They all shouted, "That hurt, you little bastard," together. Naruto said in the same tone, "Oops." He saw Kakashi move behind him, but he felt more. He was behind the two shinobi the next second. He knocked them out by shoving their heads together. After that, he tied them up. He checked that they were securely fastened, then turned to Tazuna. "Why would shinobi from Kirigakure be here? It almost seemed like they were waiting for us, but if they were after any of us shinobi, they couldn't have known that we would be leaving the village. I wonder who they were after." Kakashi said with a rhetorical tone. Tazuna had the grace to appear embarrassed. With his back to the group, Naruto questioned, "Couldn't afford more than a C-rank mission?" Tazuna looked down with guilt after he jumped in surprise. With a composed gaze on Kakashi, Naruto stated, "We can handle it. We should continue." Kakashi was considering turning the mission over to more experienced Konoha nin, and Naruto was aware of this. After a brief moment of staring back, Kakashi grinned. Kakashi nodded and confirmed, "Right, we finished the mission." They walked on in silence until they spotted a boat at the water's edge, waiting for them. Once on the boat, Tazuna informed them about the wealthy and vicious businessman who was pursuing him for attempting to construct a bridge that would allow trade to enter the nation. So it's all political, Naruto reflected. I should gain some useful insight from getting involved in this for future reference. Naruto experienced an aura he had never experienced before upon arriving in Tazuna's hometown. He was truly impressed by the intensity of the killing intent he sensed from one of the chakra signatures. "What do you think?" the Kyuubi was asked by Naruto. "He's on par with the one with that damnable eye, but if you really go for it, we can probably take him. Engaging him would undoubtedly reveal your identity." The Kyuubi answered back. When Kakashi had previously used the Sharingan on the Kyuubi to verify that he was Naruto, Naruto had observed that he appeared uneasy. He therefore reasoned that Kyuubi had a motive for disliking that eye, and Naruto was aware that he should avoid questioning him. If the Kyuubi thought it necessary, he would tell Naruto. Otherwise, he would remain silent. Naruto couldn't resist saying, "I may not be able to fight, but if Kakashi engages this guy, it's going to be quite a show." He was eager to find out what Sharingan no Kakashi was capable of. He turned away from the others and grinned evilly as he looked directly at the chakra signature. Someone there seemed to be agitated by that, as there was a change in the atmosphere before what appeared to be a huge sword swung toward them. Kakashi yelled, "Everyone down," as everyone fell to the ground, with Sasuke bringing Tazuna down with him. The assailant emerged, standing atop the sword that had embedded itself in the tree next to them. After a quick glance, Naruto's heart began to race. Having snuck a peek at Konoha's bingo book, he knew who this was. One of the 7 shinobi swordsmen of the mist and the demon of the hidden mist is Kirigakure's missing nin Momochi Zabuza. Curious to see what one of the most well-known swords in the world looked like, he glanced down at the one the man was standing on. It was a huge cleaver with a hole close to the blade's end. Only the 7 swordsmen who went missing. Nin were mentioned, and there wasn't much information about the swords themselves. Even without the Kyuubi within him, Kakashi knew Naruto was not a genin level shinobi, though he was unsure how. He was not going to allow him to participate in this fight, though, because he was unsure of his true skill level. Not even slightly surprised when Naruto nodded and moved to stand close to the other 3, he gave Naruto the look that Enbu typically used to convey orders silently: protect the others. With faith that Naruto would protect the others, Kakashi turned back to face Zabuza and raised his Hite-aid to reveal his Sharingan. Zabuza exclaimed, "Wow, I'm honored," using the Sharingan right away. The man's lower face was covered in bandages, but Naruto could see that he was grinning. Beside him, Sasuke jerked in surprise. Thus, Kakashi was unknown to the Uchiha. Naruto stopped the eye roll that was about to break his expressionless gaze and thought, he doesn't even bother to learn who the strongest shinobi in the village are. He sensed that Kakashi and Zabuza were prepared to fight as soon as they let go of their desire to kill. Zabuza's desire to kill was so filled with craziness that it sent a chill down Naruto's spine and caused a sly smile to appear. He had been waiting for this moment. A true battle to the death. Ecstatic, Naruto thought, "Let's see what you have, sensei." Beside him, he could feel Sasuke trembling, and he realized that this was likely the first time the Uchiha had ever experienced such intense desire to kill. Naruto moved slightly enough to collide with him. The Uchiha raised an eyebrow at Naruto when he gave him a curious glance. It appeared to be effective because the Uchiha stopped trembling and returned to a serious, focused expression while adopting a defensive posture. With one hand across his chest and the other in the air, Zabuza used Shunshin no Jutsu to climb onto the water near them. His words, "Kirigakure no Jutsu," reached Naruto just before the whole place was enveloped in fog. Knowing that his eyes would be useless in the mist, Naruto closed them. He had sharpened and developed all his senses, so that he could compensate for the loss of one by using another. He had discovered this while hunting in the Forest of Death. He could hear his teammates shift and sense where everyone was, but his nose was also useless because the mist had a distinct smell of moisture that overpowered everything else. Since no one could see him, Naruto thought sarcastically, rolling his eyes this time, "I'm aware, thanks." He heard Kakashi tell them, "Don't worry. He'll come after me first. He's a master of silent killing." Zabuza's voice mockingly listed the body's killing points as he tried to determine which to target. The spine is a person's favorite, I would have to say. Although it causes a lot of pain, it sometimes prevents movement and doesn't kill. Naruto gave a respectful answer to himself. Brain damage. It looks so nice when it explodes, but you humans have such a pitiful little one. The Kyuubi returned the favor. However, that isn't enjoyable. If you do that, you will be unable to play with them later. Well said. Then kidneys. You know, they're really rather tasty. Gross. Consume the liver rather than the kidney. After sensing Zabuza's approach, Naruto knocked everyone away before he could stop his teammate's charge. He then removed his dual blades from the seal and crossed them to prevent Zabuza's sword from descending. He pushed it into Zabuza, who threw it into the water, after kicking out with his foot, which formed the chakra spike on the bottom. A clone of Zabuza appeared behind that clone, slicing through it, and he felt a clone of Kakashi appear behind him. He turned to see the Zabuza clone being told not to move by Kakashi, who was holding a kunai to his neck. This is becoming really annoying. Naruto reflected, there are so many better ways to fight than clone on clone on clone. When he saw another Zabuza move behind Kakashi and destroy the clone in his grasp, he remained motionless. Naruto didn't think a battle between such powerful shinobi would look like that. It seemed like all of that was posturing. Naruto saw Kakashi trapped in a ball of water as the battle was moved to the top of the nearby water. Naruto was struggling to contain his frustration at the entire altercation. Nothing positive had caught his eye. This is a time waster. After giving it some serious thought, Naruto decided he could take no more. It was time for them to begin, and he didn't believe either of them was being serious. To make it appear as though Kakashi had done it, Naruto created a clone and changed it into Kakashi while everyone was concentrating on Zabuza and Kakashi. He then concealed him in his shadow. He made Zabuza release Kakashi in order to dodge when his clone moved to a shadow across from them all and launched a volley of kunai at him. However, it appeared that Zabuza assumed it was him because he turned to face Naruto and directed all of his murderous energy toward him. However, Naruto showed no signs of discomfort at being the target of such a powerful killing intent. Instead, he simply stood with his arms crossed and the same bored expression on his face. Kakashi grabbed Zabuza's arm before he could move, drawing his focus back to him, before he started creating numerous fast motion hand seals that Kakashi imitated, seal for seal, to produce identical water dragons. Zabuza jerked his arm free. Naruto was struggling to keep up with them because they were going through them so quickly. He was able to quickly copy them. Naruto was finally able to witness the battle he had been anticipating, and even match the amount of chakra that went in, so that they cancelled each other out. He observed Kakashi playing Zabuza and matched each of his movements. That Sharingan is really fascinating, Naruto mused, frowning. He could see that the Sharingan must have been responsible for Kakashi's ability to see Zabuza's movements in the instant they were made. Kakashi's ability to read people was amazing. After hearing Zabuza's previous speech patterns, he was able to predict his thoughts by observing his reactions and speaking aloud what he knew Zabuza was thinking. Kakashi was bluffing that he could read Zabuza's mind, but Naruto knew that he couldn't because he could read Zabuza just as well. As he performed a water jutsu that blew him into the air and trapped him against a tree with his kunai, he witnessed Kakashi use Zabuza's confusion to put him under a minor genjutsu to further frighten him. Kakashi informed him that, "It's over." Then Naruto felt the shift from the second chakra signature that had been hidden during the fight and saw the senbon needles fly into Zabuza's neck. That it is, Naruto thought, finally satisfied. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Zabuza had a very good ally, whoever they were. Without actually causing death, it was incredibly difficult to strike the right spots in a person's neck to achieve the desired effect. The voice of Zabuza's companion said, "True, indeed." When Naruto looked up, he saw a young man on a branch of the same tree above Kakashi, dressed in the mask of a Kirigakure hunter. Kakashi leapt to see how Zabuza was feeling. Zabuza would most likely wake up again in half an hour, but Naruto knew he wouldn't feel anything. Naruto felt for Kakashi's pulse and saw him narrow his eyes. Kakashi's young companion used Shunshin to land next to the body and pick it up as he moved away from Zabuza. He used Shunshin to depart after saying, "Thanks for your help. I will be disposing of the body now, farewell." Kakashi covered his Sharingan again and said, "Well, time to get Tazuna home." He then fainted. Rolling his eyes, Naruto said. Thus, chakra exhaustion was a drawback of using the Sharingan. He believed that the more adept one was at controlling the Sharingan, the less chakra it would drain. That's right. In response, he heard the Kyuubi growl. That was all the information the Kyuubi provided, but Naruto waited to see if he would elaborate. After giving him a silent mental shrug, Naruto put one of Kakashi's arms around his shoulders and carried him the remainder of the way to Tazuna's house. Later that night, Kakashi concluded that Zabuza must still be alive and advised them to train so they would be prepared for his return. "They train while you tell me what's going on," Kakashi said, looking directly into Naruto's eyes. Naruto winced inwardly. Although he had done a good job of avoiding this conversation, it now seemed impossible. Naruto was waiting a considerable distance away for Kakashi to return so that they could have their talk, while Kakashi was instructing Sasuke, Sakura, and a clone he had made to appear as though he was learning about chakra control with them. It was not long before Naruto heard Kakashi's approach. Naruto remained where he was, crossing his arms and leaning against a tree. Kakashi sat across from Naruto, his back to the tree. Kakashi closed his eyes and asked calmly, "So, how about you tell me what's going on?" His smile was more eerie than comforting. Naruto let out a sigh. "Here we go," he pondered. "I take it you read up on our files before taking us as a team, but did you notice anything about me the first day you met me?" Naruto responded. Kakashi scowled. Kakashi's honest response was, "I did notice something seemed off about you, but I didn't wonder too much about it." More than he asked, Naruto said, "You thought it was the Kyuubi that made me seem off." The slight widening of Kakashi's visible eye was the only indication of his surprise. "The traitor, Mizuki, told me about it when he had me steal the scroll." "Ah. It was the first time I had actually observed you, so yes, I thought it was the Kyuubi," replied Kakashi. Kakashi's inability to recognize that he had first encountered a clone was now known to Naruto. He was grateful that Kakashi was honest with him, but he was unable to reciprocate. He could only provide partial truths to support his story. Remember when I said that I was going to become the Hokage? Naruto assumed Kakashi was one of the people he had made that promise to, even though he wasn't positive if his clone had actually told Kakashi this. He knew his clone was telling it to anyone who would listen. Kakashi simply gave a nod of approval. Naruto stated, as though he were merely stating a random fact rather than something as intimate as it was, "Well, it's hard to become a Hokage when everyone despises you, you know." Kakashi flinched, and Naruto saw it. "I didn't know why the villagers acted the way they did at the time, but I knew that they didn't like me. It seemed like they disliked me even more when I showed that I had intelligence of any kind." Kakashi's gaze widened with comprehension. Kakashi exclaimed in amazement, "You behaved in that manner to give the villagers the impression that you posed no threat." Naruto gave a nod. "The plan was for me to continue to act that way until I made genin. That was where I would start showing, little by little, what I was actually capable of. But I didn't see the point in continuing to hide my intelligence after graduating, so I stopped that once I knew I was on a team. As a shinobi, the village puts its trust in you to protect the village. It was once I was an actual shinobi that I could start proving myself to the village. I wanted them to acknowledge me, but I couldn't start doing that until I showed the village that I was willing to risk my life for their sake." Naruto concealed his distaste for speaking a lot. Since he was aware of Kakashi's exceptional ability to read people, he was trying his hardest to be mostly honest with him. He was simply fortunate that Kakashi had never met him while he was a member of the academy. If that were the case, he was certain that he would not get away with such a story. Kakashi was empathetically nodding his head. Kakashi smiled again and asked curiously, "That makes sense. You would act the way you did in public, but in private you would be training and getting stronger in preparation for when you graduated. So, how strong are you?" Naruto simply gave a shrug. Naruto's clone didn't want to learn how to use chakra to climb trees when he already knew how, so he just sat at the base of his tree, relaxing with his hands behind his head and his eyes closed. He could tell Sakura already knew how to do it and had great chakra control because he could feel the constant hum of chakra she was controlling through her feet. But he could hear Sasuke straining to maintain a steady flow through his feet. He eventually sensed their scowls directed at him. Sakura felt she had the procedure down pat and asked him, "How do you expect to get any better if you can't control your chakra, Naruto?" Ignoring her, Naruto pretended to be asleep. He probably just doesn't want to embarrass himself with his lack of control. He probably couldn't even go a step without falling. The Uchiha laughed. Despite the twitching of his eyebrow, Naruto chose to ignore the remark. It was not him who lacked control, but Sasuke. Sakura was seated beside Naruto. Sakura asked him directly, "Hey, Naruto? What happened? Why are you so different from how you were in the academy?" After opening his eyes, Naruto turned to face each of them. Sakura was shifting uneasily, clearly hesitating. Sasuke's arms were crossed and he was frowning deeply. He thought it strange that they had both been thinking about him. He must have underestimated the severity of his clone. He wasn't used to people asking him about himself, unless they were worried about him being a threat, but that didn't seem to be the case. Naruto let out a sigh. He sat up and lowered his arms while giving them a serious look. He and Sakura were seated when Sasuke arrived. "Look, I don't know if you guys have realized it or not, but I'm not really all that popular in the village," began Naruto. "Quite simply," Sakura said, "it's because of your pranks." Naruto retorted angrily, "If you think that, you aren't as smart as you seem." He had to relax. This was his team for the time being, despite his strong objections, and he had to get past this point in order to progress, and the only way to do that was to continue working with this team until he was promoted. Sakura narrowed her eyes and questioned angrily, "Excuse me?" At him. Sasuke's eyes were likewise narrowed. Naruto said, "Sorry, I didn't mean that." However, it was clear that he wasn't sincere. "From as far back as I can remember, even before I started doing those pranks, the villagers didn't like me. They seemed to think I was some sort of trouble maker. So, since they saw me that way, I decided to just go with it." Sakura and Sasuke's eyes widened in dis. Sasuke questioned, "Do you know why they treated you that way?" "As far as I can tell, it had something to do with my birth, but that's as much as I know," replied Naruto. He could lie all he wanted because they couldn't read him the way Kakashi could, but he reasoned that the best course of action was to be as close to the truth as possible without actually saying it. Sakura exclaimed, "So, that was all just fake then? How you acted when we were in the academy? All of it?" Naruto simply gave a head nod. Sasuke said, "So what, this is the real you?" Once more, Naruto nodded his head. "But why stop acting like that now?" He was shocked to see understanding in Sasuke's eyes and admiration flash in both of theirs. "Well, I'm an adult now, aren't I? I'm a shinobi of the leaf, and now that I'm a genin, I can start proving myself to the village, so that they can acknowledge me for who I truly am, not for what they see me as. Besides," Naruto said, "don't I make a better teammate now than if I acted the same as I did during the academy?" With smiles on their faces, Sakura and Sasuke both said, "Definitely." Sakura added gravely, "That doesn't excuse you from training." After turning his gaze from her to Sasuke, who was grinning in agreement, Naruto shrugged his shoulders and used his hands to flip backward onto the tree, landing feet first. He then ascended the tree slowly before flipping off and landing on his feet when he reached the tallest branch. Sakura and Sasuke both gazed at him in wonder. Sasuke questioned sharply, "How long have you known how to do that?" In response, Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders. With seriousness, he asked Sasuke, "Want me to teach you?" After giving it some thought, Sasuke looked at him for a moment and then nodded. Naruto spent the remainder of the day teaching Sasuke how to manage his chakra sufficiently to ascend the tree. Naruto was an excellent teacher, despite Sasuke's refusal to acknowledge it. His patience and straightforward explanations made learning how to do it simple. Sasuke reached the top of the tree by the end of that night. He decided that maybe Naruto wasn't so horrible after all when he was at the top of the tree and he looked down at him. Naruto was nodding at him. A few days after Naruto had taught Sasuke how to walk up trees, he decided he wanted some alone time. He had just heard the story about Tazuna's grandson, Inari, and his father, from Tazuna, and he wanted to be on his own to contemplate it. Since Naruto never had a father, or someone who he looked up to as Inari did, he couldn't understand why the child was so affected by the man's death. People die. That's life. The man didn't sound so much like a hero to Naruto anyway. So the guy helped close a gate to block off a flood by jumping into the raging water, and he objected to a corrupt man trying to run their country. Big deal. That just meant that he was a man, doing his duty. That didn't make him a hero. What was a hero anyways? Someone who gave up their life for strangers. An idiot. The Kyuubi supplied. That may be right, Naruto said back with a frown. All of the heroes Naruto had heard about were dead, except for the Sandaime, but Naruto had never seen him do anything heroic. He had just heard that he was remarkably powerful. All of a sudden, Naruto felt the chakra signature of Zabuza's ally coming his way. Naruto lowered his chakra signature and leaned back against a tree, waiting quietly in sight. He got a good look at the effeminate male once he came into view. He was definitely around his own age. He actually looked nice, surprisingly, and he didn't have any malicious aura about him, as Zabuza did. When the boy caught sight of Naruto, he got in a defensive stance, pulling out some senbons. Naruto put his hands up, showing his intent not to fight. A look of contemplation came across his face. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Naruto asked in curiosity. "What?" the boy answered cautiously. "You're close to Zabuza, aren't you? I mean, you would go so far as to put yourself in danger just to rescue him, so you must be, right?" "Yes," the boy answered, with a curious look on his face. "How would you feel if he died?" Naruto asked. The boy's face contorted in anger and he got back into a defensive stance. "I would kill whoever did it," he answered with true malice. Naruto was surprised. The boy seemed so mild-mannered, but that seemed to set him off. "No, I mean how would you feel? I've never been that close to anyone, but I know someone who was. A person that was important to them was killed and apparently the kid completely changed after. I just don't understand why," Naruto said with brows furrowed. The boy looked at Naruto blankly for a second, before putting his senbon away and taking a seat near him, feeling no threat. "I once didn't have anyone. I was alone. Then Zabuza-san found me. He took me in when nobody else would. He fed me and gave me a purpose," the boy told Naruto. Naruto frowned. "You didn't have a purpose before?" he asked. The boy gave a small, sad smile. "No, I had nothing before Zabuza-san. He is everything to me. He is my purpose for living. Without him, I would go back to having nothing." "Why? I understand Zabuza helped you out, but don't you think living for someone isn't living at all? Shouldn't you be living for yourself?" Naruto asked, still confused. The boy gave a soft laugh. "Think about it this way. Imagine if you were alone. No home, no family, no friends. No way to make money or take care of yourself. You think, perhaps I should die. There is nothing for me, no reason to live. Then all of a sudden, someone comes around and gives everything that you could ever want or need. How would you feel? The boy asked, looking carefully at Naruto's face. Naruto did think about it, hard. He thought about what life might have been like for him if he didn't have the Hokage looking out for him. A look of realization came across his face. I would feel that I owed my life to that person and I would try to return the kindness they have shown me. Naruto began looking at the Sandaime in a new light. He had never really thought about it, but the Sandaime really had helped him out more than he realized. He would have grown up on the streets, with no money for food or a place to live without his help. Every day would have been a struggle for survival. Instead, the Hokage gave him a place to live, money for necessities, and taught him what he needed to know in order to get stronger. Exactly. The boy said, giving Naruto the same small smile. I still wouldn't think that I had nothing if that person died though. Naruto continued with a look of deep thought upon his face. I would live for the both of us because that person gave me a reason to live, so I shouldn't waste what they gave me by giving up. The boy looked shocked at Naruto's response. It seemed that he had never thought about that before. He gave Naruto a genuine smile. It was so warm that Naruto felt slightly uncomfortable. Nobody had given him such a smile before. You're right. The boy said. Hey, what's your name? Naruto asked him. The boy looked surprised. Haku. He replied. All right, Haku. I'm Naruto and for your help, I'm going to give you mine. It's only fair. I'm pretty good with medical ninjutsu, so I'll help heal Zabuza for you. Haku gave Naruto a shocked and suspicious look. Why would you do that? He's your enemy. No, he may be Kakashi's enemy, but he is not mine. In fact, there is something I want to ask him, as well. If you don't trust me, you can keep a senbon to a vital point while I do it, and any sign that I might not be truthful, you can kill me. Hey, you can't decide things like that without discussing them with me first. He heard the Kyuubi bellow at him. It'll be fine. Naruto replied. Haku stared at him for a few minutes, before nodding. He didn't know why, but he felt an intense feeling of calm and trust around this Konoha shinobi. Naruto gave a small nod of his own to Haku. Great. When would you like to start? He asked Haku. Now, if you have the time. But I warn you, I will have to blindfold you on the way there and back. You understand, right? Haku asked him seriously. Of course. Naruto replied calmly. Haku didn't completely trust him, which was smart. If Naruto knew the way to their base, he could just bring his teammates there later if he decided to change his mind. Haku took off the obi around his waist and tied it securely around Naruto's eyes. Here we go. Naruto heard him say, before he felt Haku shunshin them. He was still blindfolded as Haku continued to walk him into the building where Zabuza was. After walking for a bit, Haku stopped and took off the blindfold. They were standing in front of a door. Zabuza-san is right inside. I'm not sure how he will respond to seeing you, so please be careful. Haku warned. Naruto nodded in response. The second Haku opened the door, Zabuza's killing intent started spilling out. Naruto couldn't help it, he briefly smirked. It wasn't every day that you met someone with as malicious a killing intent as yourself. Good job, Haku, you brought me the brat to kill, Zabuza said, glaring at Naruto. Naruto just stared back blankly. Nope. I'm here to heal you and to ask some questions. Naruto responded. Zabuza froze. He looked to Haku in confusion, getting a nod of confirmation. I don't understand, he said, confused. Well, let's just say, you sparked my interest. It's not every day that you meet someone that's similar to you. Naruto replied, still with no emotion in his voice. Zabuza narrowed his eyes and then laughed. Kid, you are nothing like me. What are you, a genin straight out of the academy? So you've got some skill and maybe you surprised me. But you have no idea what you are dealing with. Naruto narrowed his eyes as well. He might have been right about the genin comment, but not the rest. Naruto then smirked, before letting loose all of the killing intent he had been holding back. It was a mixture of his and the Kyuubi's, and the Kyuubi even helped by added more of his own, enough so that Naruto's eyes turned red, pupils becoming slits, his whisker marks became darker, his nails longer and sharper, and his body radiated savagery. You are not the only demon in the world. Naruto growled, his voice low and gravely from the power radiating off of him. Zabuza had never felt fear before, but he swore then that the feeling shooting up his spine must have been that. Even Haku seemed to be frozen in place, staring. Just as quickly as the power came, it was gone, leaving a blank-faced Naruto standing there once again, looking at them calmly. So, shall I heal you now while I ask my questions? Naruto asked. Zabuza and Haku seemed to visibly jerk before looking at each other. Alright. Shoot. Zabuza said hesitantly. Naruto approached him and took the seat that was on his left before starting to use his medical ninjutsu on him. He noticed that Haku stayed on the other side of the bed, just watching. Why do you work for someone as weak, Gato? I would figure someone like you would rather slice someone like him in half than work for him. Is it because you need money? Naruto asked, while concentrating his chakra carefully. He didn't look up, but he could feel Haku and Zabuza exchange another look. If you must know, we are using him for his money, Haku answered. Okay. And what do you need the money for? That is our own business, Zabuza gruffly answered. Fair enough. What if I can help you with that? Naruto asked them. They looked at him in shock. What do you mean? Haku asked. Well, I am in need of some eyes and ears, you see. And you guys seem like you could be some of the best out there. I am, unfortunately, not able to go out and gather my own information about what is happening in the other countries, and you are actually the first shinobi outside of my village that I have met, beside the two that attacked us earlier, but, no offense, those guys really aren't up to par. Naruto told them, finishing up on Zabuza. He was definitely getting better with the medical ninjutsu. I would, of course, pay you quite well for your services. I can even give you the locations to some abandoned hideouts that you guys can use. That's it? You just want us to tell you any information that we come across? And you just give us money and places to stay? Zabuza asked in amazement. This was the easiest deal he had ever made. Yup. Naruto replied, sitting back in the chair, crossing his arms and looking at them. Deal. Zabuza said without hesitation. Haku shot his eyes to Zabuza in surprise, before looking at Naruto and giving him another one of his smiles. Thanks. If I pay you in advance, would you mind killing Gato a little ahead of schedule? He's kind of a pain in my ass right now. Zabuza gave a look of sadistic glee. It would be my pleasure. Naruto nodded and handed Zabuza a bag full of money. He looked shocked at how much money was in there. Luckily, since Naruto had never spent the money given to him, he had a lot saved up. Less than he would like, considering his clone had been obsessed with ramen apparently, but more than enough for this deal. A major pain in my ass. Naruto said, smirking evilly back. Zabuza was starting to like this kid. Here's all the hideouts that are empty that you can use. Naruto told them, pulling out a map and marking off a couple of places. And this is so that I can find you to give you payment, and if you need to contact me, you just push some chakra into it and I'll be there. Naruto pulled out a seal tag and gave it to Haku. The scroll Naruto found in the Hokage's home that had his name on it described how to do some of his dad's most famous jutsu. It also gave evidence that his dad was indeed Namikaze Minato, since he was the one that wrote it. It looked as if it was written just before Naruto's birth in case of his death. Naruto now knew how to do the Hiraishin no Jutsu that his dad was so famous for. Naruto was just working out the kinks on it now for his own specific use. Traveling to wherever Zabuza and Haku were at the time would be the longest he had traveled using it though, so he hoped it would work. There was also a jutsu called the Rasengan that he was going to start learning once he got back home. How did you find out about all of these hideouts if you were never able to leave Konohagure before? Haku asked him. I had a contact that told me about them. Don't worry, he's a solid source. Naruto didn't tell them that he hadn't heard from this contact in a few years, but he knew that the information would still be current. They both just nodded at him. I should probably head back before my team starts looking for me. Naruto told them, getting up. Oh, and it was a pleasure meeting the two of you. Naruto told them with a bow, before disappearing. How the hell? Zabuza asked in confusion. Haku just shrugged his shoulders. They both agreed. Naruto was an odd one, but he was also very fascinating. They were looking forward to their new arrangement. Naruto made it back to Tazuna's residence just in time for dinner. Inari started yelling at Naruto, telling him he should stop being a hero because heroes die, and then started crying. Naruto didn't know why he was yelling at him specifically, but he was becoming a nuisance. Hey kid, I'm no hero, Naruto said, staring at the kid seriously. He was bluffing really well right now, but doing the medical jutsu, followed by the Hiraishin back to where he placed the seal for it in his backpack, had really worn him down. It was the furthest distance he had gone so far, and it made him slightly nauseous, so he was a little cranky. I'm just doing my job. Everybody has a job, a duty, a reason for living. Your grandpa is building this bridge. Your dad was doing whatever he felt was right. Your mom is taking care of you. Maybe one day you'll grow up and get one yourself. Naruto said, giving the kid a glare before leaving the table. Naruto. Sakura yelled after him in shock and anger. Inari stared down at the table dumbfounded, before running off to his room, still crying. Naruto was so exhausted from the day before that he was still asleep when the rest of his team and Tazuna were ready to go to the bridge the next morning. They decided to leave him since something seemed to be bothering him, judging from his attitude the night before, and they didn't feel like getting in the middle of it. They figured he would just catch up when he awoke. An hour later, Naruto awoke with a jerk, feeling two malicious auras entering the house. He didn't feel any chakra, so they had to be some other sort of assassin. Naruto got up and dressed quickly, before melting into the shadows, to see who was coming. Samurai? Naruto asked the Kyuubi, looking at the two men who were standing over Inari's mom in the kitchen. Looks like it. The Kyuubi confirmed. Naruto could tell that Inari was standing just outside of the kitchen where the two men and his mother were. Naruto wanted to see if Inari would man up and protect his mom, or if he would let her be taken away. He figured that if the kid let his own mother be taken, then he was worthless and beyond help. But if the kid stepped up, Naruto would help out. Just as the samurai were about to leave with Inari's mom, Inari finally came out of hiding, yelling at them. Stop. You can't have her. You'll have to go through me first. Inari charged at them, with all the courage he could muster. Before Inari reached the samurai, who had their swords out ready to strike the kid, Naruto jumped out of his shadow and knocked them out, hitting them with the butt of his blades against their temples. He would have killed them, but the kid didn't need to see that. He was just a regular kid, not a shinobi, so his life shouldn't involve death and violence. After he tied them up, he turned to the brat. Good job, kid. You were able to protect her until I could get here. Naruto told him. Do you think you can keep taking care of her while I find your gramps? Of course. I'll do a good job and make you proud. Inari yelled after Naruto, as he was leaping away in the trees. Make yourself proud. Naruto called back in response. He hoped that he didn't miss any action on the bridge, and he wasn't disappointed. It looked like Gato and his army had just arrived. Naruto could sense Zabuza and Haku hiding just off the bridge near Gato's army. He was waiting to see if they would hold up their end of the bargain. He really didn't want to kill them. He would, of course, if it came down to it, but he kind of liked the pair. It sounded like Gato was yelling something about giving up building the bridge or die. He also mentioned the assassins sent to kill his daughter and grandchild. Oh, sorry. I took care of those two guys. You should really look into hiring better assassins. Naruto told Gato as his way of entrance, jumping to Tazuna and his team's side. Zabuza. Kill them. Gato ordered angrily. Zabuza and Haku, who was no longer wearing his mask, appeared on the bridge next to Gato. That was the hunter. Nin, but he's so young, he heard Sakura say. You know, I think I would rather kill you, Zabuza said, before slicing Gato in half. Naruto heard Sakura gasp next to him. Maybe not. Better assassins don't seem to want to listen to you, Naruto said to the corpse of Gato, as the two pieces of him fell to the ground. Before any of Gato's army could attack Zabuza and Haku in revenge, they used Shunshin to appear on either side of Naruto. Kakashi hadn't been expecting it and was caught off guard. Our job is done here. The rest is up to you. See you around, kid, Zabuza said, looking at Naruto. Naruto nodded to him, then at Haku, who gave him a smile, before they disappeared. Naruto. What just happened? Kakashi asked in utter confusion. Oh, I just convinced them that working for Gato was a bad idea, that's all, Naruto said with a shrug. When? Yesterday. Naruto replied, nonchalantly. Tazuna and his team couldn't believe that Naruto had actually convinced Zabuza to leave, and without fighting Kakashi again. I think we have something a bit more important to worry about, Naruto told them, shifting his eyes to the now jobless and very enraged army. Right. Kakashi said. This is going to be slightly difficult. Not to worry. We're here to help. The group looked to find Inari leading all of the villagers, who looked ready to fight. Gato's group didn't look so bloodthirsty now that they were actually up against another army. They were actually looking quite unsure. Naruto looked between the two groups with a frown. Gato's army looked only slightly trained, but they had some nasty-looking weapons. The group Inari was leading was all the untrained villagers, some with only sticks. If they were to fight, there would be lots of casualties. It would be a damned massacre, even with the help of Team 7. If he really wanted to be anyone with power, he needed to be good at politics, which was about utilizing the power of minds and words. He needed this fight to end without bloodshed, which meant he needed to make some sort of impressive speech. He just hoped that it would work. Why continue to fight, when you have no reason to? Naruto's voice while addressing the leaderless army carried to everyone on the bridge. The man who hired you is dead. You will get no more work or money from him, and if you fight these villagers, there will continue to be no money for your country. If you want jobs and to make this country better for you and your families, you should help build this bridge with your neighbors. You will once more have a purpose, a job, and be a part of history. You will all be known for helping make this country a better place, instead of being known for trying to destroy its future. Even to Naruto's ears it sounded like the lamest thing he had ever said, but he needed to establish himself here. If this worked, he would be one step closer to renown. I think I'm going to throw up, the Kyuubi said. It actually sounded like he was gagging a little. Oh, shut up. Naruto responded in humiliation. At last, Team 7 had to depart Nami no Kuni and head home. Naruto continued to be astounded that the absurd speech had been effective. He reasoned that the reason Gado's army listened to him was because they were illiterate fools accustomed to hearing from those who sounded more intelligent than they were. They had even consented to assist in completing the bridge. When Naruto emerged from Tezuna's house, prepared to depart, Kakashi exclaimed, "Oh look, the hero is here. Good morning, Mr. Hero. Please make sure all the bad guys leave us alone on our way home." Kakashi addressed him. Sakura and Sasuke burst out laughing. Naruto snarled back as he walked past them in the direction of the boat that was waiting to return them. "Fuck off." Behind him, he could hear their snicker growing louder. "They have a point, you know. Imagine the incredible battle you would have been in if you had simply remained silent and allowed events to unfold." The Kyuubi said something. Of course, he was correct. If you exclude blocking Zabuza's sword once and using his chakra to stab those so-called shinobi twins, Naruto's only action during this mission was to talk. Additionally, it was his first time ever leaving High no Kuni in his first A-rank mission. Naruto suppressed a sigh at the lost opportunity for a solid battle, but this was preferable. He was still able to conceal his abilities, and it appeared that Kakashi was becoming less interested in him. Not only that, but he now employed 2 spies. Who would have thought that words could be so helpful? When Team 7 arrived at the boat, they discovered Tezuna waiting for them. He grinned broadly and expressed his gratitude to everyone for their assistance. He was especially grateful to Naruto. As the boat began to sail away, Sakura called back to him, "So, do you know what you are going to name the bridge yet?" "The Great Naruto Bridge," smiled Tezuna in response. Naruto saw the mouths of Team 7 open as their gazes swung to him. Naruto angrily yelled, "Don't!" at them and the Kyuubi, who had begun to speak as well. They started giggling once more, but they remained silent the whole way home. Before they could even consider saying anything more to him, he left for his apartment as soon as they returned to Konoha. On their own, they could deliver the damn mission report. He had had enough of being around people. He felt Sasuke outside his apartment the following morning. For a few minutes, the Uchiha had been pacing in front of his door, as if he was unsure whether or not to knock. Given that their mission had been a higher-ranked one, Team 7 ought to be given the day off. Sighing, Naruto dressed and walked to the front door, opening it after concealing all of his books and scrolls in the seal on his arm. He noticed Sasuke standing in the doorway, seemingly unprepared to knock, his hand flying behind his back. Inquiringly, Naruto lifted an eyebrow at him. Before he spoke, Sasuke nervously cleared his throat and furrowed his brows. Sasuke said haltingly, as though he didn't understand why he was asking, "I was wondering if you would like to spar." Knowing that the Uchiha was less skilled than him and that it would be a waste of his own training time to agree, Naruto was about to shoot him down, but he hesitated before responding. He had no idea how skilled the Uchiha were, and it would be helpful to learn how to use a Sharingan to combat someone. He sensed the Uchiha's potential as well. As the Uchiha improved his skills, it would be good to have a sparring partner close to his level. While he was with the Uchiha, he could simply send his clones to train. Instead, Naruto shrugged and said, "Sure, why not?" Sasuke gave him a startled look, as though he thought Naruto would say no after giving a nod. He stepped aside to let Naruto out. He locked the door and followed Sasuke to the regular training area for Team 7. When they arrived at their destination, Naruto asked Sasuke, "Was there anything in particular that you wanted to work on?" Sasuke frowned and said, "Everything. I need to get better at everything." Naruto gasped. The Uchiha was aware of his shortcomings and was very serious about strengthening. "Why?" Naruto inquired, genuinely interested. With an angry tone, Sasuke retorted, "I am nowhere near close enough to kill that man." "Which man?" asked Naruto, perplexed. Naruto could practically see the hate radiating from Sasuke as he uttered the name, Uchiha Itachi. Naruto's confusion only grew. Uchiha Itachi. Why? Was Sasuke unaware of his clan's true nature? Because he killed your family? Sasuke shouted, because he massacred my family. Even though Naruto had never witnessed the Uchiha display such intense emotion before, he was able to see the madness blossoming behind his eyes. In an effort to avoid upsetting the Uchiha, Naruto asked in a calm voice, "Do you know why he did it?" "Because he's insane." Sasuke continued to shout indignantly. Naruto knew that Itachi had been forced to kill his clan, but he wasn't going to tell Sasuke the truth. "Do you really think that's the case? You grew up with him, didn't you? You're his brother, so you knew him better than anyone. Think back. Did he really seem insane to you?" He wasn't sure if the Uchiha would even hear him. He had to see for himself what was true. Sasuke was genuinely taken aback by that remark, and his rage subsided in favor of perplexity. He stumbled Sasuke, uncertain of what to think. "Think back, to before what happened. What was your brother like? What was his reputation? How did he seem?" Naruto said quietly. Sasuke answered softly, his eyes distant. "He was always so nice to me. He was always so busy, doing missions, but he always made time to spend with me. Everyone called him a prodigy. They said he was one of the best shinobi in Konoha." "And the rest of your family? What were they like? Did you notice anything strange about them?" replied Naruto. Sasuke's gaze returned to Naruto with a piercing expression. His rage vanished and a contemplative expression took over his face when he saw Naruto's expressionless face and composed manner. Sasuke then recalled an instance in which he had overheard an argument between Itachi and his father, in which the father accused Itachi of being more devoted to Konoha than the Uchiha family, as if they were separate. "My mother was very kind and loving, but the rest of the family was very secretive and focused on power. They would have a lot of meetings that I was not allowed to attend. My father was usually pretty cold to me, but he was really focused on Itachi. At some point, he and Itachi had some sort of falling out and they stopped talking. Then my father started giving me attention, telling me not to be like Itachi." Sasuke's face displayed a wide range of emotions and thoughts, which Naruto could see before it ended in confusion once more. Finally, Sasuke said, "I don't understand. I don't know what to believe anymore." "Well, Itachi obviously left you alive for some reason. How about instead of trying to kill your brother, you have him tell you the truth?" said Naruto. "If he were the Uchiha, that is what he would want." He saw Sasuke scowl before nodding and turning back to face Naruto with a determined expression. "You're right. I've been so focused on getting revenge that I didn't even stop to think why Itachi did it, but I do want to know." Naruto concluded for him, "Right. And in order to do that, you need to get stronger, so that you can face your brother." Feeling a little strange, Sasuke nodded. It felt odd for it to be gone because he had been holding this hatred and retaliation inside of him for so long. Even though the Uchiha had currently left Sasuke, Naruto was aware of the madness that threatened all of them and knew that it could still return in another form. "Look at you, speaking once more rather than arguing. I would say that you use words to cover up your lack of skill if I didn't know you were truly strong." The Kyuubi scoffed. In reality, he was astounded by his Jinchuriki's capacity to manipulate others simply by speaking to them. Although the child didn't appear to be aware of it, that was a very uncommon and potent talent. Disregarding the Kyuubi, Naruto concentrated on Sasuke. The Uchiha appeared worn out and was not even looking at him. He assumed that the Uchiha had a lot to process, believing something for years and then learning that it might not be true. He had previously desired that spar, but it didn't seem like he was up for it. Naruto asked, "How about we get something to eat?" He wasn't sure why, but he had a hunch that the Uchiha didn't want to be alone, but also didn't want to talk anymore. Sasuke simply gave a head nod. On their way to Mizu no Kuni, Naruto recalled finding packets of dango in Sasuke's bag. Thinking that Sasuke must enjoy them, he escorted him to a dango stand. He had Sasuke order anything he wanted after they had sat down at the bar. Seeing the glares he was receiving from the people behind the counter, Naruto decided not to get anything himself because he didn't want to eat anything that they would surely tamper with. When their order was taken, Sasuke looked bewilderedly at Naruto. He inquired, "Why didn't you get anything?" Naruto shrugged and said, "I ate already." Sasuke scowled as he surveyed the store. He saw that people were glaring at Naruto. Some even stood up and walked away. After placing Sasuke's order in front of Naruto, he even saw the shopkeeper glaring at him. Sasuke asked him, "So this is what you meant earlier?" in reference to Naruto's clone telling them that the villagers didn't like him. Naruto simply nodded in agreement. Naruto simply put his elbow on the counter and rested his head on his hand while staring at the ceiling. "Did you not order anything because they would do something to your food? Does this always happen?" he asked. Sasuke was becoming agitated. Naruto claimed that since it was related to his birth, he was powerless to stop it or take personal responsibility for it. Sasuke was about to scold the customers in the store when he was cut off. Naruto turned to face the three individuals who had entered the shop behind them, and Sasuke asked, "Naruto, Sasuke, what are you two doing here?" Naruto noticed that the three wore Hite.8 and were about his age. A man with medium length brown hair pulled back in a high ponytail was the one who called out to them. Sasuke, irritated at being interrupted, answered, "HN." It had to be a rhetorical question because Naruto didn't respond because it was clear what they were doing there. The same man sat down beside Naruto and said, "I'm amazed to see you two together without there being a fight. Are you two trying to get along now that you're on the same team?" The female member of the group sat down beside Sasuke and began to glare at Naruto while flipping her long blonde hair, which was also tied up in a high ponytail over her shoulder, in what Naruto assumed was a flirtatious way. Sasuke's unfinished food in front of him caused him to frown in frustration, as Naruto witnessed. The ponytailed male was seated next to the other big brown-haired male in the group. With the exception of the blonde, they appeared at ease around him, which led Naruto to surmise that they might be his clone's friends. "I think we get along pretty well," Naruto shrugged and said to them. After staring at him in disbelief, the three turned to face Sasuke, who simply grunted in agreement. The big male exclaimed, "Wow, Naruto. Being a genin really made you grow up a lot, didn't it, Shika?" Naruto turned to face him and saw the bewildered expression of contemplation on the ponytailed man's face. With narrowed eyes, he answered, "That it did, Shoji. This was the new Ino. Shika. Show team, I see now." Naruto needed to exercise caution. The way the Nara was staring at Naruto made him a little uneasy, and he could see the intelligence in his eyes. This youngster was intelligent and most likely already realized that Naruto's behavior was too different from his previous behavior to be the result of his transformation into a genin. Sasuke got off his stool and left some cash on the counter, saying, "Come on, Naruto. I'm not hungry anyway." Naruto trailed after him. As they walked away, he could feel the Nara's eyes on him. He suspected that he would see him again soon. Naruto followed Sasuke out of the store and back to their regular training area. They started training for the remainder of the morning and into the majority of the evening, suggesting that the Uchiha had restored his fighting spirit. It began with sparring, but Naruto had to interrupt to teach Sasuke some taijutsu and ninjutsu techniques. The sparring went on until the sun started to set. Sasuke had left them, heading home with a weary but contented expression. Naruto simply sat down on the ground and waited, resting his back against one of the three big logs of wood that were positioned vertically in the ground. The Nara arrived after a mere 30 minutes of waiting. Naruto was relieved to be by himself. Shikamaru leaned against Naruto's right log as he sat down and said, "You want to tell me what's going on?" "Not really, but I have a feeling that if I don't, you're going to try and figure it out on your own, which might make things worse," Naruto responded. Shikamaru appeared irritated and said, "You're not the same Naruto that was in the academy. You didn't even recognize us earlier. Maybe because the Naras dislike ignorance and he was unable to decipher what was happening." Naruto needed to think carefully. He would most likely start snooping around or, worse, questioning people if he didn't tell the Nara something credible. This would draw attention to himself. However, he was unable to use the same story he told Kakashi because it seems that the Nara had already realized it wasn't him, so claiming he was acting wouldn't work. He sincerely regretted being in the same class as this man. Naruto calmly answered, "I'm not the same, no, but it was Naruto that you knew." Without surprise, Shikamaru said, "A clone. Therefore, he had already deduced that much. I think he's just perplexed by how and why I did it," Naruto thought. He sincerely hoped that the Nara wouldn't run off and tell everyone after he told the truth because there was really no other option. You never know, but he didn't seem like the kind. "The Hokage wanted me to attend the academy, but I had already started learning on my own. I thought it would be a waste of time and training if I were to go, so I created a clone to go in my stead," Naruto replied with a smile. With suspicion, Shikamaru said, "Seems you do well learning on your own, since you could create an advanced, self-sustaining clone. Have you ever read through the books in the library? They hold an immense amount of knowledge and jutsu. Not in the civilian and academy section of the library. You would need to get into the Jonin level section for something like that," Shikamaru continued. Naruto needed to watch what he said from now on. He was speaking with a Nara, and the only way he was able to obtain high-level information was by basically stealing and altering the jutsu for which they were famous. "Look, I've already figured that the reason you did this, and how you made the clone, is something that you would get in trouble for, and I really don't care. I won't say anything, because I can tell you didn't do it to endanger the village in any way. So why don't you just tell me the truth? Mendokusai, Naruto could tell that the other was growing tired of his pause. Naruto grew irritated and thought, all right, if he wants the truth, then I'll give it to him. This guy was unavoidable, so there was no need to mince words. Since my dad, the Yondaime, sealed the Kyuubi inside of me the day I was born before dying, the villagers act as if I am the Kyuubi and they fear and hate me. They seem to really get offensive when I show that I have any intelligence, so I have to sneak around to get any information. I learned how to do fuinjutsu and I used it to create a method of being able to travel in the shadows, which is how I was able to access the higher level sections of the library and why I thought it would be a waste of time going to the academy, because I already had skills and knowledge that far surpassed anything that they taught there. It was also through the use of a bunshin created from 2 nature manipulations and fuinjutsu that I was able to create the self-sustaining clone. Shikamaru blinked slowly, a blank look on his face. He finally scowled as he looked at the ground and said, I see. The way the villagers treat you, your birthday, your resemblance to the Yondaime, the Hokage's interest in you, it all makes sense now. You're the only one to notice. Naruto rolled his eyes and snorted. With a smirk, Shikamaru answered, apparently, you know, I was friends with that clone of yours back in the academy, but I think I like the real you better. You ever play shogi? Naruto smirked and said, nope, though I've read how to. We should play some time. I have a feeling that you would actually be a challenge. Shikamaru stated to him. Naruto nodded and his grin widened. Naruto's smirk disappeared as he saw Shikamaru rise and depart from the training area. Then you can tell me how you were able to create that method to travel in shadows. Even though Naruto had engaged with more people than he felt comfortable doing on this day, he still needed to talk to one more person. Indeed, it was the sole individual he had planned to encounter that day. He had originally intended to visit the Hokage after training with the clones in the forest until nightfall, but Sasuke's arrival severely disrupted his plans. Thus, Naruto reluctantly headed for the Hokage tower. After his secretary gave him a displeased look and let Naruto into the Hokage's office, he knelt before the Hokage, just as he had done when he first met the Kyuubi. Naruto remained kneeling and greeted him, Hokage-sama. With a bewildered expression on his face, the Sandaime said, Naruto. Is there something you wanted? He used to visit him frequently when Naruto was in the academy, and he would always call him Gigi. Since Naruto pretended to be a grandchild, he had treated him as such. Naruto appeared to have changed and distanced himself from the Sandaime after he became a genin. He missed having Naruto around, but he would not say it aloud. In fact, he used to eagerly await Naruto's visits. Naruto cocked his head slightly to the side but remained silent. The 2 Anbu hiding in the office departed with a signal from the Sandaime after he comprehended the silent communication. Naruto glanced up at him after they had departed. The Sandaime inquired, how did you know they were there? Previously, Naruto didn't appear to be aware of their presence, but now he appeared to be aware of their arrival and departure times. All Naruto said was, I think I owe you an apology and an explanation. Surprised, the Sandaime blinked. The Sandaime gestured to the chair beside Naruto and said, please, go on. Naruto accepted the offered seat after nodding and rising. Naruto frowned and began, first, I would like to apologize for deceiving you. The Sandaime's eyes grew wide, and he started to speak, but Naruto interrupted him by holding up a hand. The Sandaime scowled but nodded his head, signaling Naruto to go on. Please, let me just say everything I need to first, because there is a lot to say and not all of it is good. But I feel if you hear the entire story, you will understand. His face took on a serious expression that he only used when talking about delicate and significant topics. Naruto crossed his arms and sat down, saying, I have been avoiding the villagers for a long time. I'm sure you can understand why. The Sandaime nodded despite narrowing his eyes. I know you have done everything in your power to help me and you will never know how much that means to me. I owe a great deal to you and I have done nothing but squander the generosity you have shown me and abuse it. I only recently truly understood what you have done for me, which is why I am here, telling all this to you now. Naruto was a bit hesitant, but he might spend the rest of his life in prison for telling the Hokage nearly everything he was about to do, but the Hokage had a right to know. He was the only person who had shown him kindness and care since he was born. Naruto had been deeply affected by the conversation with Haku. Naruto therefore told him everything he had done, starting at the beginning. Not feeling the need to reveal everything, he took care to omit some of the methods he had acquired. There were just a few hours until dawn when Naruto finished his story. With his elbows resting on his desk and his chin resting on his hands, the Sandaime had remained silent the entire time, utterly absorbed in what Naruto was saying. Naruto decided he must be deciding what exactly he was going to do after he sat there for a few more minutes. He recognized the Hokage's predicament. In essence, Naruto had just warned him that he posed a threat to the village as a whole. He had been snooping on and stealing from Konoha shinobi for years, and despite having his seal under control, it was weak. He had also been able to fool the entire village, including the Hokage himself. Naruto finally broke the silence by saying, "I understand if you wish to arrest me. I will not put up a fight." As he had been since Naruto entered the office prepared to reveal everything, he could hear the Kyuubi shouting at him angrily. At last, the Hokage stated, "That will not be necessary." His expression had changed from one of seriousness to one of cool decisiveness. Naruto tried not to show his surprise, but he was certain that his eyes had widened slightly. "If what you are saying is true, then you are a valuable asset to Konohagore. It would be a waste to throw you into a cell. You would make an excellent Anbu. But before you could, you must first become a chunin, which means I will have to enter your team into the upcoming exam." He believed that he would be punished, but it appeared that the Hokage would overlook everything and attempt to elevate him. "Hokage Sama, you're not angry?" Naruto questioned, perplexed. The Hokage gave an honest response, massaging his temples, saying, "No, you were correct. Hearing the entire story made me understand. I'm not angry, I am actually ashamed of myself." He seemed to have lost all of his energy. Naruto frowned and said, "I don't understand. Why would the Hokage feel self-conscious? There was nothing wrong with him. I am old Naruto, and not what I once was. I have grown ignorant and perhaps I still cannot look beyond what I wish to see to how things really are. I have always been told that I was a dreamer." The Hokage exhaled. "I thought I was protecting you by not allowing anyone to speak about the events of your birth and by not giving you special attention, but I have just made things worse. You are the way you are because of this foolish old man's actions. I cannot blame you for anything you have done. You have become an exceptional young man, Naruto, and I am actually very proud of you." This time, Naruto's eyes began to widen. With a genuine and kind smile, the Hokage said, "I know you will do great things, Naruto. Whether you see it yet or not, the will of fire is strong in you and I genuinely believe you will one day surpass me." With haste, Naruto left the chair and knelt down again in front of the Sandaime, his head lowered. More solemn than ever, Naruto declared, "I will not let you down, Hokage Sama." Before, no one had ever trusted him. They stopped talking when the Sandaime said, "I know you won't, Naruto." After lowering his head a little, Naruto got up and walked out of the tower. At last, he realized what Haku had been attempting to convey. Because he owed it to the Sandaime, Naruto knew he would unconsciously sacrifice his life for them. Naruto sensed Haku's chakra calling to him through his matching seal just a few days before the chunin exams. He had been training with his clones in the forest since the sun had risen, and it was now mid-morning. Naruto was relieved that the seals worked because it was Haku's first time calling him. Although he had personally tested them, he was beginning to worry that maybe they weren't very effective over long distances. Before he drove the Hiraishin to where Zabuza and Haku were waiting, he made sure all of his clones were engaged in some task. "Good morning, Naruto-kun." When Naruto appeared in front of them, Haku said. Zabuza sat on a couch beside Haku and said, "Yo. Good morning, Haku-chan and Zabuza-san. I hope that both of your lives have been going well." Naruto answered. He concealed his nausea from the Hiraishin. When he returned, he knew it would be considerably worse. "Great, many thanks. Your information about the safe houses is greatly appreciated." Haku gave Naruto a bow. "Yeah, enough of the nonsense. Have you received our money?" Zabuza inquired. Although he threw a pouch full of cash at Zabuza, Naruto arched an eyebrow at him. "What have you got for me?" Naruto inquired. Zabuza would get right to the point if he so desired. Otogakure is a new village that we have heard a lot about. It appears to be developing and spreading its bases abroad rather rapidly. We have been informed that the leader of this group is a man by the name of Orochimaru. Haku clarified. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This Orochimaru was known to him. He was one of the legendary Sannin of Konoha and the one who had made the curse seal that was on Anko. And if what he had read in some books was accurate, he was apparently a wicked genius. So that's what he's been doing for the past few years, Naruto pondered. Additionally, we've been informed that he intends to invade Konohagore using Sunagakure. I'm not sure how he intends to accomplish that, but based on what we've been told, it has to do with the impending chunin examinations there. You must be aware of that. Haku went on. Naruto gave a head nod. This wasn't good. Therefore, Orochimaru intended to attack Konoha in his place using Tsunagakure. Or was Suna an ally of Oto? However, why? The smallest of the 5 great shinobi nations, Suna, was even smaller than Oto. They couldn't defeat Konohagore even if Oto joined Suna in the alliance. Although the village would suffer harm, Konoha could still prevail. He wanted to attack Konoha, but why? Was he merely trying to exact revenge on Konoha, or did he also seem to want to start a war? Nothing seemed right about that. He should have used Kumogakure, who was the closest person to Konoha in power, if he wanted Konoha to become weak enough to take control. Furthermore, even though Orochimaru was receiving heat from the village as a result of his experiments, he had already established his own village and should no longer be concerned about Konoha. There had to be another explanation. Is that all? Inquired Naruto. Actually, Orochimaru was formerly a member of another group that has been receiving some attention. Akatsuki is what they are referring to themselves as. We only know that they overthrew the village leader and took control of Omegakure when they first appeared there, which was around the time of the Third Shinobi War. As far as Zabuza and I can tell, it is now only a small group of extremely powerful mercenaries, most likely S-ranked shinobi. Since they keep to themselves, we haven't been able to gather much information about them, so we don't know why they do it. They move in 2-person teams and appear to have very few members. They all have red clouds on their black cloaks. Haku scowled in response. Zabuza's expression was one of annoyance. Did they approach you and ask you to join? Naruto inquired, sensing something strange between them. They gave him a startled look before nodding. What were you saying to them? They could probably provide more than I could. We refused them. I don't want to be discouraged from our plans, and neither does Zabuza-san. All we require is your help, Haku answered. You've been really beneficial. Do you need anything while I'm here? Naruto inquired. Actually, I have a question. Zabuza stated. With a raised eyebrow, Naruto signaled to him to go on. When we previously fought, you used those 2 blades. Are you good with them? The question caught Naruto off guard, but he kept it to himself. I'd say I'm proficient with them. After Naruto answered, Zabuza hurled a cloth-covered object at him. Naruto grabbed it, sensing a strange energy emanating from whatever was inside. He peered inside and saw 2 thin, double-edged blades pulsing with an odd energy. Near the top and bottom of the main blade, they both had tiny, upward-pointing blades. They are called Kiba. Zabuza informed him. Naruto scowled. He was aware that he had heard that name previously. He raised his eyebrows in astonishment. Naruto started in amazement. These are one of the swords of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Zabuza completed the task for him. Naruto simply stared up at him, perplexed. Zabuza's expression changed to one of embarrassment. We took them back from the prior owner. We believed you would utilize them more effectively. And we wanted to thank you for everything you have done for us. Haku smiled as he added. Zabuza continued to turn away from Naruto, clearly uncomfortable. Thank you. With sincere gratitude, Naruto said, bowing deeply to them. This was the first gift he had ever received, and Naruto was genuinely honored that someone would give him such an inexplicable gift. Yes, but be careful not to cut yourself. You know, these are supposed to be the sharpest swords in the world. They use lightning chakra, but it's okay if you can't use that. They will remain lethal. Zabuza remarked, uncomfortable with the whole thing. Don't worry. I'll learn how to use them correctly. Naruto grinned slightly as he spoke. Zabuza scratched his head and averted his gaze once more in shame. Haku simply grinned and glanced between the 2. That was all. You may now leave. Zabuza spoke rapidly. After bowing to them, Naruto vanished. Naruto-kun will one day excel as a shinobi. We can also say that we were right there with him, supporting him as he went. Zabuza nodded as Haku spoke softly to him. Naruto collapsed to his knees in a retch as soon as he returned to the forest. Concerned, the clones halted their work and rushed toward him. I'm all right. Give me a moment. Sitting back and taking deep breaths, Naruto told them. After giving him a doubtful glance, they returned to training while continuing to watch him. Sitting, he composed a letter to the Hokage. Although he was unsure whether the Sandaime was aware of the Suna threat, he wanted to be safe and warn him. Since the Akatsuki didn't seem to be interested in Konoha, he omitted that section. The letter was then delivered by a clone. Not now. Naruto gave a frustrated huff. His apartment's barrier seal simply exploded, alerting him to Sakura's presence and her impending knock. Lately, he was becoming incredibly popular. I can go. A clone of him offered. It'll just get worse if you use it again. It's okay. I'll leave. You guys keep training. In any case, I must adjust it. Naruto sighed as he slowly stood up. He entered his apartment using the Hiraishin. He dropped to his knees once more upon arriving, but he suppressed his retch. Sakura was still knocking on the door, and he could hear it. He inhaled deeply, got to his feet, and gathered himself as he walked slowly to the door. Hello Sakura-san. After opening the door, Naruto spoke. She appeared to have just turned and was beginning to walk away. Oh, I assumed you were away from home. Sakura blushed as she spoke. Can I help you with something? Naruto questioned her. Well, actually. May I enter? Sakura asked clumsily. Without replying, Naruto simply widened the door and stepped aside to let her in. Would you like some tea? After reading that it was considered courteous to offer tea to visitors, he asked her as she shut the door. She was curiously scanning his apartment. It was spotlessly clean and only had a few pieces of furniture that looked old. Sakura assumed it would be messier, but she wasn't sure why. Yes, please. She smiled awkwardly in response, walked over to the couch, and sat down, still scanning the room. Naruto went to the kitchen and filled a pot with water. Instead of using his old stove, which took nearly 10 minutes to boil water, he heated the water rapidly by concentrating some fire in his hand. He filled 2 mismatched and chipped cups with water, then added the tea. He sat on the other end of the couch and placed her tea on the coffee table in front of her. That was quick. Surprised, she said. As he waited for her to explain her purpose for being here, Naruto simply shrugged in response and took a slow sip of his tea. The tea helped him feel less queasy, so he was grateful for it. With trepidation, Sakura picked up her cup and clutched it. I am aware that Sasuke has been your trainer. Every time we train together as a team, I can tell that he has become much stronger recently. I feel like you two are so much ahead of me. I don't know what to do, but I don't want to hold you guys back. I'm just so frail. Sakura's hands tightened around her teacup as she stared into it, her eyes beginning to water. For a while, Naruto remained silent, unsure of how to comfort her or even if he wanted to. He had no idea why she had chosen to approach him, but like Sasuke, Sakura was a member of his team, and he gave credit to those who recognized their weakness but desired to strengthen themselves. When they all trained together, Sakura was typically left alone because Naruto knew that Kakashi was inexperienced in training her. He did regret Sakura's inability to gain strength. She needed a teacher, but her sensei gave Naruto and Sasuke more attention than she did, and her parents were civilians. I can probably help you out. Naruto spoke slowly. She was in dire need of training, and he was the only person he knew who could provide it. Are you able to? Really? Sakura asked eagerly, her eyes still watering as she gazed at him. Naruto responded with a nod. Can I train with you and Sasuke? Naruto tilted his head sideways. You wouldn't respond well to our style of instruction. I must instruct you individually, he informed her, her enthusiasm faded. Why? Dejectedly, she asked. Sasuke is a master of ninjutsu and taijutsu due to his innate skills. Given your exceptional chakra control, I believe medical ninjutsu and genjutsu should be your main focus. Naruto told her in a contemplative manner. Sakura gave him a startled look. You really think I could be good at those? She inquired. She had never before considered practicing any other kind of jutsu. She assumed it was because she believed that was what she should be doing because that was all Team 7 had ever worked on. Ninjutsu and taijutsu. Naruto gave a nod. However, are they truly helpful? They appear more protective. I only know Kurenai. Sensei is a genjutsu user, and I don't know anyone who practices medical ninjutsu outside of hospital nurses. We didn't even learn any of those in the academy. Uncertain, she said. You could use them offensively, but they are more defensive. Furthermore, our current team lacks diversity. Consider the other teams in comparison to ours. Although they all have advantages and disadvantages, each teammate fills in the gaps. Kakashi was attempting to train you to be a powerhouse like Sasuke and me. However, even if you are an expert in taijutsu or straight ninjutsu, there are ways to counteract it. Naruto gave her an explanation. Sakura frowned as she looked into her tea. You're correct. Only ninjutsu and taijutsu are known to us. A team consisting solely of those two jutsus could easily be overtaken, according to the books we read in the academy. Sakura spoke introspectively. However, I will say that they appear to do that on purpose. Teams like the Hyuga, Inuzuka, and Aburame teams are trained for particular purposes. They make an excellent tracking team because of their abilities. However, they still possess unique skills that enable excellent teamwork. For instance, the Hyuga is a close-range fighter, the Inuzuka is a mid-range fighter, and the Aburame is a long-range fighter with his Kakaichu. When it comes to reconnaissance, the Ino, Shika, Sho team excels. Shikamaru can use his shadows to hold enemies while the Akamichi covers their back and the Yamanaka enters their minds to obtain information. This gives them time to gather the information they need. Up until now, we have only used ninjutsu and taijutsu, but our team is supposed to be the powerhouse team, the one sent out to mess up the enemy. Therefore, you would complete the team if you were a medical ninjutsu and genjutsu user. Furthermore, you would be the most crucial component, providing Sasuke and I with much needed assistance. Why he had to explain it to her was beyond Naruto's comprehension. He believed that if she learned the right jutsu for a particular skill set, she would realize how valuable she would be to the team. He assumed, however, that she was never made aware of the value of having a diverse team. Although Naruto knew a lot of different forms of jutsu and was a well-rounded jutsu user, he wasn't going to take on all the team's work. We could easily be the strongest team then, Sakura said, her eyes wide with wonder. Her expression abruptly changed from one of hesitation to one of resolve. Please teach me in medical ninjutsu and genjutsu. The chunin examinations are just 3 days away. You realize that I will need to exert a lot of pressure on you to be ready by then? Naruto posed a serious question. With the same resolve in her eyes, Sakura simply nodded her head. Excellent. I want you to get as many medical and anatomy books as you can and begin reading them right away. Be ready for the quizzes I will be giving you during our training. Before you comprehend the physiology of the body, I can only impart so much knowledge to you. Let's get started. On the day of the chunin exams, Naruto awoke with a sense of calm and readiness. Whatever attack Orochimaru had in store, he and his group were prepared. He trained in the forest with more of his clones, and he had clones train non-stop with Sasuke and Sakura. Because of the warning Naruto had given the Hokage, Kakashi was placed on high alert and had let Naruto train the team in his place. Every now and then, he would show up where a clone was training one of his other teammates and observe for a while, occasionally offering advice or corrections. Since Naruto was still learning genjutsu, his assistance was greatly appreciated when he was teaching Sakura. However, assisting Sakura also helped Naruto. When he left his apartment after getting dressed, Sakura and Sasuke were waiting for him downstairs. Eventually, without consulting him, Sasuke, Sakura, and even Kakashi had all decided that Naruto was their team's unofficial leader, but it didn't really bother him. They started to make their way to the building where the first portion of their exams would be held. After spying on some lower-level genin, Naruto learned that the test would be divided into 3 sections and informed his team so they could prepare. Kakashi was waiting for them halfway to the building. He smiled proudly at them and walked with them the rest of the way to the building. Kakashi escorted them as far as he could before telling them, all of the rookie 9 will be partaking in this exam, but don't let that affect your feelings if you have to fight them. Just give it all you've got. Make me proud, kids. He received a confident nod from Sasuke and Sakura, and Naruto exchanged a glance with Kakashi, telling him in silence that he would watch the other competitors. They then proceeded down the hallway to the room they were meant to visit. When they got to the 2nd floor, they discovered a large group of people standing outside a room's door. Sasuke and Sakura trailed behind Naruto as he scowled and stepped forward into the crowd to observe what was going on. The doorway, which bore the number 301, was blocked by 2 Konoha shinobi, who knocked back any shinobi that attempted to pass. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto glanced at Sakura and Sasuke, who both saw the genjutsu surrounding the number. They turned to face him again and let him lead in silence. With a simple shrug, Naruto guided his group past the throng and toward the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, which was actually room 301. There was no real threat there, in his opinion. Additionally, he reasoned that the 2 chunin who were posing as genin and teasing the others were only there to keep an eye out for any threats. The girl with the dark brown hair pulled up in 2 buns and the Konoha Hite.8 shouted at them, "Hey! You're one of the rookie teams. Where do you think you're going?" When Team 7 turned to face her, they noticed that everyone was staring at them. Sakura responded on their behalf, "To the 3rd floor, where we're supposed to go." They walked on, turning around again. The Konoha guards at the door exchanged glances as the crowd dispersed to follow Team 7. One said to the other, "So that was Kakashi's rookie team. He seems to have done well for his first team." The other person concurred, saying, "This should be interesting." Naruto sensed eyes on his back as he led his group to the stairs. He pivoted to gaze at the balcony overlooking him and his group. He noticed a man wearing a green spandex bodysuit, his black hair chopped into a bowl shape, and his eyebrows raised high. Naruto turned away from what he saw in a hurry. That man can't be sincere. I don't feel any chakra coming from him, and he looks completely insane. He heard the green, glad man leap down from the balcony. The male pointed at them and shouted, "Hey, don't ignore me. Fight me." Naruto experienced a strong feeling of déjà vu, as though his academy clone was standing behind him. Naruto looked at Sakura. Naruto and Sasuke didn't want to talk to anyone, so they had decided that Sakura would speak for them. Sakura informed the odd male, "It is not permitted to fight outside of the exams. It would disqualify both our teams." He got punched in the head by the same girl who had the buns standing next to him. "Don't go off on your own, Lee. And stop trying to fight everyone before the exams even start," she called out to him. The other man beside her sneered arrogantly at them. The second male's eyes told Naruto that he was a member of the Hyuga clan. Naruto pivoted and resumed guiding his group in the direction of the stairs. "Stop ignoring us," shouted the girl with the bun and Lee. Without turning around, Team 7 kept moving forward. The Hyuga male asked them, "Hey, what are your names?" Sakura caught Naruto's eye. While Naruto and Sasuke paused to wait for her, they kept their backs to them. Sakura responded, facing the opposing team, "It's impolite to ask others their name before giving their own." The Hyuga answered, "Hyuga Neji." Naruto scowled, that one he had heard about. "Rock Lee," exclaimed the person in the green outfit. The girl with the bun said, "Tenten." Sakura pointed to each and named them, saying, "I'm Haruno Sakura, that's Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke." Following the introductions, Sakura turned around and followed Naruto and Sasuke as they resumed their walk. Tenten screamed angrily, "What is up with them? They're just baby genin and they act like that. It pisses me off." Lee remarked, "Haruno Sakura," as he watched her leave in awe. Neji glanced at his team in frustration, then back at Team 7's retreating rear. "They're a fascinating group." Neji thought to himself, "I'm excited to see what they can do." Naruto could sense the chakra signatures of dozens of shinobi inside room 301 once he and his group arrived at the actual doors. Sasuke responded with his own excited smirk. Sakura simply grinned confidently, and he smirked almost evilly at his team as a thrill of excitement ran down his spine. When they opened the door, everyone in the room was watching them. Naruto led his team to where Shikamaru and his team were waiting, ignoring everyone and maintaining the bored expression he had adopted once the doors began to open, keeping a watchful eye out for danger. Shikamaru smiled and raised a hand in greeting, saying, "Yo." Naruto returned the greeting with a nod. On rare occasions, he and Shikamaru would go out to dinner with Shikamaru's team, but most evenings they would spend together playing shogi or gazing at the clouds. Naruto was taken aback by how well they got along. When Naruto informed Shikamaru about altering the Nara clan's signature jutsu, Shikamaru was likewise not upset. He was more interested in it and asked him a lot of questions. Sakura shifted to stand close to Ino, and the two started arguing. Ino looked at Sasuke and flipped her hair at him as he stood silently beside Naruto, waiting for the test to start. Naruto also nodded his greetings to Choji. Suddenly, Naruto noticed a chakra signature that looked a lot like his own. The Kyuubi pricked up in curiosity, too. A pale male with reddish, brown hair, dark shadows surrounding his turquoise eyes, and the kanji for love above his left eye on his forehead caught his attention as he turned to face the chakra source. He was wearing a Sunagaku Hitai.8, Naruto observed. He turned to face Naruto, as if sensing that the latter was observing him. While the other gave him a hateful look and narrowed his eyes as well, Naruto did the same. Orochimaru therefore intended to send the Jinchuriki from Suna. Before he heard someone calling to him, Naruto noticed that his teammates were staring at him bewildered. Naruto looked around and saw 3 other Konoha shinobi approaching them. "So we're all here then. It's been a while since we've been together like this. I see you even changed your outfit for the occasion too, Naruto." The dog next to the smirking male who spoke, the blushing Hyuga girl's eyes, and the muted humming of Kakaichu emanating from the last male all gave Naruto the immediate impression that they were the final members of the Rookie 9. In response, Naruto simply shrugged, causing the Hyuga girl to look perplexed and the Inuzuka's mouth to drop in shock. Because of his sunglasses and collar, he was unable to see the Aburame's reaction, but he was undoubtedly taken aback as well. "What happened to you?" inquired Kiba, who Naruto recalled as his name. Once more, Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders. A male voice cautioned, you guys are attracting a lot of attention. When the group turned around, they saw a man wearing glasses and a Konoha Hide.8, with light gray hair pulled back into a low ponytail, approaching them. Naruto wanted to narrow his eyes, but he kept his face expressionless. Naruto was wary of this new male because he smelled like snakes and something about him seemed strange. She had informed him that Orochimaru had a snake obsession during one of his few conversations with Anko, who occasionally visited or sparred with him while he was training in the forest. You guys are awfully noisy for rookies. After the white-haired man identified himself as Kabuto, Naruto ignored their conversation and kept looking around the room until he heard Kabuto mention that this was not the first time he had taken the test. Having to retake it didn't seem to bother this Kabuto, Naruto observed. Sakura remarked, so you must know all about these exams then. Kabuto said, yes, especially with these. He pulled a few cards from the pocket at his hip. When some of the rookie 9 gave him a curious look, he responded, these are nin.info cards. To show them what was on the cards, he laid them on the ground and removed one from the stack. While he was preoccupied, Naruto secretly took a handful of the cards and placed them in his pocket so he could review them later and possibly give them to Kakashi to present to the Hokage. After complaining for some time, Shikamaru offered to help Naruto with his internal investigation, which he had wanted to do even though he had been told to just keep an eye out and not really get involved in the invasion. Naruto was scanning the room as Kabuto explained the forthcoming events to the other rookie 9, making a note of every Otto and Suna nin present. Suna had 10 teams, but it appeared that Otto had just one. Most likely, the Otto team was only there to monitor the situation. There was a bang and the examiners emerged in a puff of smoke after Kabuto put his cards away, first giving them an odd glance. The tall, burly man in front of the group identified himself as Morino Ibiki. He was wearing a black trench coat, had scars on his face, and had a bandana Hide.8 covering his head. The surprise in Shikamaru's eyes caught Naruto's attention. The fact that the head of Konoha's torture and interrogation unit was an examiner suggests that they were taking this invasion very seriously. Everybody come up and take a number. That number will decide where you sit. Once everyone is seated, we will begin the first test. Ibiki stated. Adjacent to Ibiki, Naruto saw a male Konoha shinobi holding papers. Already, he had informed Sasuke, Sakura, and Shikamaru that the first test would be written. Naruto saw that he was sitting next to the Hyuga girl after everyone had taken their seats. Good luck, Naruto.kun. Hinata said shyly, her cheeks flushed. Although she was a Konoha shinobi, albeit a weak looking one, for the daughter of the head of the Hyuga clan, Naruto considered ignoring her because she seemed kind enough. He reasoned that his future political maneuvers could benefit from his friendship with the daughter of the clan's head. He said to her, thank you, Hinata-chan. Good luck to you too. She quickly averted her gaze as she flushed. Naruto's brows furrowed. What was the purpose of that? Ibiki was standing at the front of the room, reviewing the rules as he wrote them on the board, he thought to himself. So, cheating is the purpose of this test? Do the questions actually seem that difficult? Naruto was confident that his team would be able to answer the questions with ease. They probably added some examiners posing as contestants to copy off of them. He hoped the other two on his team would pass, but he also knew Shikamaru would have gotten off his ass and studied so he could move on. It occurred to him that Shikamaru had informed his teammates about the test and encouraged them to study as well. They were instructed to start after Ibiki gave them an hour to finish the test. Before acting, Naruto turned the paper over and examined the test. The questions were quite challenging, but he knew the answers to every one of them because of his vast reading and training knowledge. In order to make any response he wrote on his test appear as though he was simply scribbling on it rather than writing in answers, he first wrote his name in the upper right corner of the page. After that, he answered the questions. He could sense Hinata occasionally giving him a questioning look, and he pondered whether the examiners would catch her copying him. In 5 minutes, he finished the test, flipped it over, and sat back. Since he was reportedly the first to complete the test, he noticed that Ibiki was staring at him. Naruto grinned as he met his eyes. Ibiki gave him a blank look in return before grinning back. As the hour drew to a close, Naruto observed teams being eliminated. After 45 minutes, Ibiki announced to the competitors that the 10th question was about to be asked. 13 teams had been disqualified for cheating thus far. He instructed those who did not wish to respond to the last question to depart after outlining the guidelines for the 10th question. Naruto scowled. This particular portion of the test was unknown to him. He reasoned that Ibiki had most likely made it up on the spot, adding it right before the test began. As he waited for the final question, he kept his hands in his pockets and his back relaxed. The sheer number of departing teams actually caught him off guard. There were 14 teams left in the test with just 5 minutes remaining. When the allotted time was up, Ibiki grinned savagely. He said, "You all pass," to them. While many of the other genin shouted in confusion and rage, Naruto raised an eyebrow. Naruto turned to face Shikamaru, who looked back at him. How like head of T&I, messing with everyone's heads, they both smirked at one another in silence. Suddenly, Naruto sensed a recognizable chakra signature rapidly approaching from the building's left. He was about to raise an eyebrow in inquiry when a blur smashed through the structure. When Anko appeared in front of the genin, Naruto's face went blank. She was holding a banner behind her that he thought read, "Test number 2, led by examiner Mitarashi Anko," but her body was completely obscuring the words, so he couldn't tell. She introduced herself loudly and instructed them to follow her. When she gave him a huge smile, Naruto gave her a deadpan expression. She shook with excitement as she said, "Wow, only 14 of you. That test must have been a good one, Ibiki. But my test will knock them down by at least half." Ibiki gathered the tests while the other genin went off with Anko. When he reached Naruto's, he flipped it over and gave it a perplexed glance. Then he noticed the fuin at the top of the paper. His eyes widened in shock, and then he opened the seal, revealing the right answers to every question. As one of the few individuals outside of the Hokage and Kakashi to be aware that Naruto had provided the information regarding the Suna invasion, Ibiki thought with a smile, that Uzumaki Naruto, he's one to look out for. Anko approached Naruto and put her arm around him as the other genin started to move toward the location of the second test. Her face was so close to his that she practically whispered in his ear, "Nice to see that you made it, kiddo." She was also purposefully massaging his large chest. He wanted to roll his eyes at her actions, but he kept his arms crossed and his face blank. She was deliberately drawing attention to him. He knew that the next test would be a survival test, so it's likely that she was trying to make him the target of everyone's attention. Ignoring the shocked and perplexed expressions on the faces of the other Rookie 9 members, Naruto thought, sadistic woman. She was taking them all to the forest of death, he realized. He raised an eyebrow in question as he looked at her, but she winked back and released him so she could take the stage and explain the second test to the group. After she released him, Naruto smelled a lot of snakes and turned to face the other teams. One team, each wearing a straw hat and a purple rope tied around them, caught his attention. The person with the long hair and the vacant eyes caught Naruto's attention. That one had the most overpowering snake odor. That male actually smelled like a snake, not just because he was surrounded by snakes like the others. His attention was drawn to Shikamaru, and Naruto's eyes narrowed. He turned his gaze to the dark-eyed, long-haired man. When he noticed Shikamaru following his eyes, he asked him in silence if he was certain. Naruto hardly made a nod with his head. Shikamaru sighed as a serious expression crossed his face. Naruto barely avoided the kunai aimed at his face by moving his head in time. The next second, Anko was behind him, and Naruto had to use his own kunai to block the one she was aiming at his throat. He was surprised to see so many genin jerks. Anko whispered his name and said, "Are you ignoring me, Naruto-kun?" "Never." He smiled calmly in response. The long-haired man who had moved to stand directly behind her had thrown a kunai, which Anko swiftly moved to rest against the tongue that appeared next to her. Anko's face was directly in the line of the kunai. Naruto stiffened, prepared to strike if the man made any move. He noticed that Shikamaru was also tense, with his hands in his pockets. He was holding a kunai of his own, Naruto surmised. The man with long hair slurred around his tongue, "Here's your kunai." Naruto turned back to face him and looked him in the eyes. A look of surprise, followed by a look of intense interest, flashed in the strange man's eyes, seemingly revealing something. In response, Naruto squinted his eyes. As the disguised Orochimaru stepped aside to rejoin his group, she smiled and returned the offered kunai, saying, "Why thank you. But I don't suggest you sneak up on me, unless you want to die." Shikamaru mumbled what Naruto assumed to be Mendokusai, and sighed with relief. Anko said, "Now then, if you could all fill out these waivers while I explain the second test, we can begin. These are just so it won't be my responsibility if you die, which some of you will. Give these to those men over there." To 2 men seated behind a booth with an open curtain in front, after I have finished going over the details. Anko stepped out from behind Naruto and resumed explaining the second test. She also told them about the forest, but Naruto ignored her and concentrated hard on avoiding Orochimaru, who he could sense was observing him. He resumed paying attention after she explained the nature of the survival test. 5 days to obtain a scroll and reach the central tower. Was that all she could think of? So simple, Naruto thought, smiling at her as she turned to face him. When she had completed her explanation, she smiled and said to the genin, "Don't die." Naruto made sure that the men behind the booth handed their scroll to his team first. He created a clone while he was behind the curtain and concealed him in the shadow that emerged from it. Once they had their scroll, he left him there and proceeded to the entrance he usually used to enter the forest. Sakura questioned them in a terrified tone. 5 days? Are we really going to survive? Naruto turned to face her and noticed that Sasuke was also wearing a worried expression. Naruto tried to reassure them by saying, "We'll be fine. I've spent a lot of time in here, so I know a lot about this forest." When they returned his little smiles, it appeared to have worked. Sakura said to him, "Oh yeah, how do you know Anko-san, Naruto?" "I would run into her here in the forest every once in a while," replied Naruto. Sasuke uttered the blank, "You guys seem close." With a casual shrug, Naruto informed them that she was just doing that to make me a target. She's evil like that. Just as they were about to react, Naruto's eyes briefly went blurry before he grinned. Just before the gates in front of them opened, he declared, "Where a go?" Naruto took off right away, moving slowly enough for Sakura to keep up as he made his way to the tower. He hoped to find Shikamaru en route and steer clear of Orochimaru entirely in order to arrive there as quickly as possible. The fact that he appeared interested in him bothered him. 5 minutes later, he felt Orochimaru and his team rapidly closing in on them, so it didn't appear that he had any luck. Naruto exclaimed, "Shit," as Sakura and Sasuke stared at him in disbelief as a huge gust of wind carrying jagged leaves approached them and made shallow cuts. "Already?" exclaimed Sasuke, startled, before the trio was blasted to pieces. "Shit shit shit." Naruto repeated this in his mind, "He's rushing toward us." He took off right away for Orochimaru and his teammates, where he felt the rest of his team had been blown to pieces. He unleashed his murderous intent in order to frighten away the snakes that were pursuing him and ensure a smooth journey to his team. Since the snakes typically avoided him, he was certain that Orochimaru was attempting to divert his attention by sending them his way. When he returned to his team, he saw Sakura and Sasuke fend off a genjutsu that Orochimaru had applied to them. With a fierce snarl and all of his murderous intent directed at Orochimaru, Naruto jumped in front of his teammates. Although he was aware that it was having an impact on Sakura and Sasuke, he didn't care at the time. Naruto had to act quickly to stop this Sanin, an S-class missing nin, or else he and his team might lose their lives. Orochimaru, concealing his surprise, said calmly, "Ah, Naruto-kun. I thought the snakes would distract you for longer." In an attempt to relax, Naruto answered, "They know to stay away from something more dangerous than them. He might ruin this if he was overly sentimental." He required mental clarity. In order to fully commit to Orochimaru without worrying about their safety, he really needed Sasuke and Sakura to be somewhere else. However, that was not going to happen, so he had to act fast. Orochimaru signaled to Naruto's 2 teammates to attack him. In time to block their kunai, he managed to unseal both of his blades. Since he hadn't mastered the Kiba yet, he wasn't going to use them and risk them losing control and destroying the forest, even though he knew they could. He became aware that Orochimaru was attempting to divert his attention. Why is he attempting to separate me from my teammates? He wouldn't want anything from Sakura or Sasuke. Sasuke. Inside his head, Naruto screamed. Obviously, is the Sharingan involved? In order to maximize his speed and mobility, Naruto threw off his trench coat, released his weight seals, which were on the 2nd level, and ground his teeth together before pushing the 2 auto-nin away from him. He regretted not speaking up sooner, but Anko would have gone all out on him right away if he had revealed Orochimaru's identity, and there would undoubtedly have been casualties among the genin teams. Since Konoha was in charge of Orochimaru, it would be their responsibility if any genin from other villages were killed, which would lead to political repercussions amongst the shinobi villages. As he blocked the kicks meant for his hands and head, he shouted to his teammates, "Sasuke, Sakura, be careful. He's an S-class missing nin." Before Orochimaru could harm his teammates, he had to get rid of these 2 as soon as possible, and he could only do that by not holding back. The 2 shinobi were forced to jump farther away from his team, into the surrounding forest, as Naruto spun in a circle with his blades out, narrowly missing slashing them in the chest. He made the bird seal with one hand while jumping in the trees and following them. He called, "Doden. Doryuso," as the ground beneath and surrounding the 2 shinobi erupted in spikes. One of the nin's arms was impaled by one of the spikes. The other, who only had a scratch on his leg, leapt out of the way. Slashing with one of his blades, Naruto was on the one that had just been scratched. Once more, the blade narrowly missed, but this time it cut shallowly into his chest because he had encircled it with his chakra. Before it was too late, he began to move after hearing the other shinobi. The Auto.Nin screamed, "Suiden, Suigaden," as water angled upward and then downward, spiraling in the direction of Naruto's previous position. Mud and water splashed around as the water impaled the ground. With one hand in the boar seal, Naruto sped towards the nin, using this to conceal his movements. As he spoke, lightning erupted from his hands, combining with the water and mud that were hurtling toward the Auto.Nin and electrocuting him. "Raiden. Jabashi." Naruto heard him scream and proceeded, using his blades to cut him in half through the stomach to end his life. Then, while holding his chest, he turned on his heel and ran at the last of the Auto.Nin, who was attempting to stand up after being pelted with water and mud. On his way back to where Sasuke and Sakura were facing Orochimaru, Naruto simply raised his blade, ran past him, and severed his head without slowing down. With Sakura and Sasuke following Naruto's departure, Sasuke wasted no time in attacking the man who had earlier claimed to be Orochimaru. He used all Tree Tomo to activate his Sharingan, which he had fully developed through his training with Naruto. Orochimaru exclaimed, "You've already fully developed your Sharingan? Very impressive, Sasuke-kun." He had underestimated Sasuke's strength. His excitement caused his tongue to slip out of his mouth. Sasuke attempted to kick Orochimaru by using his speed to try to get behind him, but the Sannin ducked and wrapped his tongue around Sasuke's leg, flinging him away from himself. With her hands already glowing green, Sakura had moved on Orochimaru immediately after Sasuke, trying to strike him in a crucial spot. Orochimaru turned and backhanded her before she could, causing her to crash into a nearby tree. Sasuke shouted, "Kaden! Gokakyu no Jutsu!" and threw a huge ball of fire at Orochimaru. When he ducked, the tree he was facing exploded, sending wood fragments flying in all directions and landing on a branch opposite the one Sasuke was on. After recovering, Sakura leapt onto the branch beside Sasuke. Orochimaru's face was melting from the heat, even though the fireball had missed. He removed the mask he had worn and grinned while sticking his tongue out once more. "You have a powerful Sasuke-kun," Orochimaru stated gravely. He had no idea how Sasuke had become so powerful in such a short time. It caused him to question his strategy. He was concerned that Sasuke might not feel the need to approach him later because Sasuke was supposed to come to him for power, but it appeared that Sasuke was already growing in strength. In any case, it reduced the amount of labor he had to perform prior to occupying his body. Before precisely hurling all of his weapons at Orochimaru, Sasuke yelled, "Just wait. That's nothing." "Sakura!" he shouted out. Sasuke threw 20 weapons, but Sakura's genjutsu increased that number to 200. Sasuke once more swiftly attacked Orochimaru while he was dodging and dispelling the genjutsu, using 7 hand seals. He shouted, "Kaden! Hosenka no Jutsu!" and hurled a barrage of flaming fireballs, some of which stung Orochimaru's clothing. Orochimaru transformed into a huge snake and charged the two after landing on another branch. Sakura and Sasuke were taken by surprise and would have been struck if Naruto hadn't suddenly appeared out of nowhere, body slamming the snake and causing its head to explode when it struck a tree. Naruto looked at them and said, "You guys okay?" When they saw that Naruto was covered in water, blood, and mud, they gave him a silent nod while their eyes widened. He turned back to Orochimaru and saw his human body emerging from the snakes, saying, "Good." He gave Naruto a furious hiss. "You have also gotten stronger, I see, Naruto-kun." Orochimaru narrowed his eyes. How is this possible? He had been misinformed about how strong their team was. He would have brought some of his experiments rather than worthless pawns if he had known how powerful they were. Naruto simply swung his blades at Orochimaru without responding. Naruto's speed caught Orochimaru off guard, and he slashed his arm while he was avoiding. He activated his summoning contract with the blood coursing down his arm. He screamed, "Kachiyose no Jutsu," and a huge snake materialized, charging straight at Naruto. Naruto leapt into the air to dodge, flipped, and landed on a tree branch upside down. He pushed off with a chakra burst, sending himself crashing down as he led the way with his dual blades out in front. Naruto's momentum caused the snake's head to slam into the forest floor after the blades pierced it, causing Naruto's blades to penetrate deeper. Orochimaru's neck lengthened, causing his head to protrude from his body like a snake. And he bit Sasuke's neck as Naruto was removing his blades from the snake. In an attempt to sever Orochimaru's head by cutting through his long neck, Naruto rushed forward. However, as Orochimaru was pulling his neck back, he wrapped it around Naruto and bit him in the shoulder. When Orochimaru's chakra attacked Naruto, he suppressed a scream. When Orochimaru let him go, his feet gave way and he heard Sasuke screaming close by. Orochimaru's decision to apply the curse seal to Naruto rather than just Sasuke had been a hasty one, but he was impressed by Naruto's skill, which at the moment was superior to Sasuke's, and believed that Naruto could be an important member of his team. Furthermore, Orochimaru had a special affection for the Uzumaki clan and their amazing powers, and Naruto was one of them. As he chased away from Team 7, Orochimaru repelled the snake that had been fatally wounded and said, "See you very soon, Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun." Sakura was stunned and held the still, screaming Sasuke while glancing between him and Naruto, who was using his waning strength to try to hold onto the thin branch he had been dropped onto. Sakura shouted, "Naruto," as she saw him lose his hold and tumble to the ground from the branch he was on. Naruto felt arms snatch him before he hit the ground. As he landed on whoever had grabbed him, he heard a "oof" from below. "Damn, you're heavy, Naruto." He reflexively shot back, "It's all muscle." Then he realized who had caught him. He attempted to smirk at his friend, but it came out more like a grimace. "Nice timing, Shikamaru." The pain he was experiencing was comparable to the pain he experienced when he first released the Kyuubi's seal. Naruto tried to stand, but his vision swam, causing him to collapse again and lose consciousness. Sakura and Shikamaru exchanged blank glances. "We should find shelter while we wait for Naruto and Sasuke to wake up," said Shikamaru. Sakura nodded and assisted him in lifting Naruto, saying, "I saw a place that would work well not too far from here." Ino was tasked with gathering up Naruto and Sasuke's belongings while Shikamaru and Sakura carried Naruto between them and Choji carried Sasuke on his back. With Naruto's coat in hand, Ino yelled, "What the hell does he have in here?" She appeared to be having trouble bearing the weight. "He's worse than a woman with all the shit he carries on him." Shikamaru sighed and said, "It's called being prepared for anything, Ino." They were in serious trouble if they had to fight. "Something you could learn from. Could you please keep your voice down? We don't know who or what else is out there. We don't want to attract attention, especially now." The only person left after their two main heavy hitters were eliminated was Choji, who lacked Naruto's stamina and chakra as well as Sasuke's speed. Shikamaru would be the first to acknowledge that he was more of a tactician than a fighter, and Ino wasn't much of a fighter. Sakura had grown strong enough to be an excellent backup, but she and Choji would be the only ones left to protect their group. They took refuge beneath a tree whose roots formed a cave beneath them. They discovered evidence that the cave had been used before as they were escorting Naruto and Sasuke inside. Choji nervously put Sasuke on the ground a little rougher than needed and asked, "Do you think another team was here? Will they be back?" When they were all at the academy, Sasuke had made a remark about fat people not being good shinobi, and he had yet to move past it. Shikamaru calmly replied, "I think we'll be fine." As he put Naruto down, he observed Sakura and Ino fussing over the Uchiha. "We need to make watch teams. Choji and I will be first watch. We'll also set up some traps. We'll come and get you to take over after midnight," he stated to the women. The sun was just beginning to set when they emerged from the cave and hastily set up some traps around their area. "You should get some sleep. Come on, Choji." Shikamaru heard Choji ask, either to himself or to no one else, "What's going on?" With a frustrated tone, he replied, "Wish I knew."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.